Okay. Our next presenter is Dr. Eva Obel. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us directly, but very kindly agreed to join digitally, which was a considerable sacrifice for her, given the time of the morning it is where she is. Dr. Eva, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us. What time is it where you are?
It's just 7 a.m. now.
Oh, that's not too bad. Okay. So, without any further introduction, please let us have your thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's morning here, so there's a little bit of commotion in the house. The kids are going to school, but I'm hiding here in a separate room, and I hope we don't get interrupted. So I'll begin by sharing my screen, okay? Okay, and I assume everyone can see my screen. It looks good.
Not yet.
So,
No. Oh, yes, here we go.
yeah? Okay. Yeah, I've noticed there's a bit of a delay. I can see it when I look at my own camera picture. So good afternoon for all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to join the conference and speak, and I would have loved to be there in person to meet all of you and also to have some social connections around this event, but maybe there'll be another opportunity. I am talking about non-cognitive skills today and the assessment of non-cognitive skills and social emotional well-being in schools. And what I'll do is I'll focus on the middle years development instrument. I myself am an associate professor in the School of Population and Public Health at the Human Early Learning Partnership at the University of British Columbia. Everything I'm talking about today is really a team effort. So this is not just solely my work. This is work. This has been done for the last decade at the Human Early Learning Partnership. So I really want to acknowledge my colleagues and staff members, advisory boards, and everyone who has given input into this work. And I will have two screens, so I apologize if I kind of look slightly to the side in the camera, but that's just the best I can do. Oops, okay. Okay. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that the work I conduct at UBC takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. This is really important for me to acknowledge because Canada does have a colonial history, and the land we're on is traditionally Indigenous land. So I really feel honored that I'm allowed to work and to play and to live on that land. Here's a quick overview of what we will be doing today. I'll be talking about the MDI background. I'll be talking about the reporting of MDI data, and I'll share some data trends over time. And I think one aspect that is really important to me when I present is talking about knowledge to action, like how do we actually use these data to mobilize change? Okay, I love this quote. It really sums it up in a nutshell for me. So education through schools and teachers has traditionally focused on cognitive skills. We know that, but we also know that today, after 3 decades of research on social emotional skills and social emotional learning, that we really need to teach and educate the whole child. And this includes educating the heart. So I would even say that educating the heart is probably in the core of education, because that's where we know when people are happy, when children are happy, when children are socially and emotionally well and connected, they also learn better academically. Teaching soft skills, or also you could say 21st century skills, really doesn't take away from teaching academic learning, but it supports cognitive development. This is so important. This is why we really want to emphasize the importance of teaching social emotional learning and social emotional skills in schools. And I think especially in the time of early adolescence, which is the developmental period I focus on in my work, this is really important because that's when lots of transitions happen socially, emotionally, cognitively. And this is also when we really want to build this foundation of social emotional skills as young people are transitioning into early adulthood. Okay. So let's think a little bit of why are we actually doing this work? So you might know the quote, what is not assessed is not addressed. Data are a catalyst for action. So if we don't actually know how children are doing socially and emotionally, if we don't know much about their non-cognitive skills, then we also don't know how to change something. We don't have a baseline. We can't monitor change, and we don't really know where individuals, but also communities are standing. So data are really needed because they're a catalyst for action. And at the Human Early Learning Partnership, we have developed a data monitoring system because of that reason. The data monitoring system begins in early childhood. So what you see at the very far left is the TDI, the Toddler Development Instrument. It's completed by parents. It's completed when children are still in their toddler years. It's implemented actually through healthcare providers. So, for example, at vaccination visits, the childhood experiences questionnaire is a survey that is implemented in the beginning of kindergarten. Parents complete the survey. Then the EDI, the Early Development Instrument. Some of you might have heard that. That's probably the one we have most data on. That's implemented by the kindergarten classroom teacher. In the middle of the kindergarten year, what it assesses is school readiness. And here already we have a strong focus on social emotional development and social emotional skills in kindergarten. Then the MDI, that's what I'll be talking about today. It's the Middle Years Development Instrument. We implement the Middle Years Development Instrument in grades 4 to 8. This is the first instrument where we start switching from parent report or teacher report to self-report. So here we're actually going ahead and asking the children. We're asking the children, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are your experiences at school, in communities? And we're asking them specific questions to assess their social emotional skills. And then the YDI, the Youth Development Instrument, which is an instrument that measures social, emotional, mental health, and also experiences in the community during the later youth and adolescent years, like in grade 10, 11, so on. So what we see here is we kind of have this monitoring system established because it allows us not just to get data at one particular snap point on social emotional development, but it actually allows us to look at trajectories over time. So what we can do is we can see how do early experiences during early childhood, how does school readiness during the kindergarten years, how is that related to later social emotional well-being and social emotional development. And I really think this is important to emphasize that rather than having one snapshot in time, which of course is great to start with, we want to understand the whole child and their trajectories to know also when is the best time to intervene and to support and to promote. But today I'll be in particularly focusing on the MDI because this is my particular area of research and of interest. So the MDI is implemented in grades 4 to 8. When we started out with the MDI, it was one of the first tools that actually focused on social emotional development and social emotional learning during early adolescence. Early adolescence is a really important time. It's a transition in life. It's when really new doors open, opportunities open, but it's also a time of challenge. It's also a time when children begin to be more self-aware, where lots of children are struggling socially and emotionally. There are also some school transitions, moving from either elementary school to high school or through middle school. So lots of changes in the environment and in the child or the early youth themselves. And that's why it's a really important time, I think, to focus on. My work and the work of the Middle Years Development Instrument really acknowledges that children, they grow and they develop embedded into multiple ecological contexts. And these contexts are not separate from each other. They interact with each other. So the family, the school, the peer group, but also the larger community and also the larger belief system, global norms, politics, everything children are embedded in within society. So this is also why we need to try and take an ecological context perspective in the survey assessment that we conduct. The MDI is a self-report survey. It's theoretically derived, so it reflects the Bronfenbrenner model, the ecological systems model. It also reflects approaches for positive youth development. It's strength-based, resilience, incorporates aspects of social emotional competence, mental health, well-being, and it's a survey that is implemented at the population level. So what we're interested in is, of course, what individual children are thinking and feeling and experiencing, and what are their social emotional skills they're reporting. But at the same time, we aggregate these at the population level so that we can see how's out the population of children in our school, in our community, in our school district, and in our province doing. The MDI includes children's voices, which is really important because we want to learn from children themselves how they're doing. Yes, it's important to ask parents. It's also important to ask teachers. They all have great perspectives on children. But as we move more into the middle years and children are beginning to be more self-aware, they're actually great informants. And they are the ones who can tell us best how they're feeling and how they're doing. The MDI was developed over probably about 5 years. It's a survey that was developed very collaboratively through a large partnership. We had scientists, researchers at the university who developed the MDI in collaboration, in partnership with teachers, with children, community members. We also had other stakeholders in the room, for example, government stakeholders, really to make sure this is a tool that doesn't just provide us exciting data for research, which is great, of course, for the researchers, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that the data we collect with the MDI are applicable and that they're actionable so that we can actually use these data to make change in communities. I mentioned this earlier on in my presentation that we are on Indigenous territory in Canada. So it is really important for us that our work is also guided by an Aboriginal steering committee. This is just a snapshot here of our Aboriginal steering committee. Not everyone is in this picture. The Aboriginal steering committee are experts, elders, a lot of them actually who work with children, and they are really they're really helping us to understand how we can design our tools so that they're relevant also for Aboriginal communities, and most of all that they're culturally safe and that they adhere to OCAP criteria. Okay, now without further ado, let's jump into the actual Middle Years Development Instrument for a bit of an overview here. So what you see here are the different domains, the 5 different domains that are measured on the MDI. And these are really the domains that are critical for academic learning in school, for academic success, but also for health and well-being in life. So one domain is social and emotional development. Then we also measure connectedness with peers, connectedness with adults. We also measure physical health and well-being, school experiences. School experiences include, for example, bullying, but also school climate, school connectedness, and the use of after-school time. So what we really did with the MDI is we wanted to develop a tool that taps into whole child development and measures development in different dimensions, which is also why it was really difficult with so many different dimensions covered to keep the survey feasible. I think we have just over 100 items at the moment. This, of course, when we started out, there were way more items, and we just had to really trim it down to something that children can manage in about like 1 or 2 classroom periods that they have to complete it. Here, I'm just showing you some actual scales that fall into each of the dimensions: optimism, empathy, pro-social behavior, self-esteem, happiness. These are all really relevant dimensions, I think, for this particular conference here we're meeting about at the moment. So the social emotional development is definitely one of the focal areas on the MDI, because we think it is one of the focal areas to support and promote child and youth well-being at that point in development. Another focal area that is particularly interesting for schools and for communities is the connectedness domain. So the connectedness domain measures relationships with adults at schools. And some of the questions are questions like, do you have an adult at school who you trust, who you can talk to, someone who you can go to when you have a problem? So that particular relationship with adults and seeing within a school district, what percentage of the children say, no, I don't have any adult to go to? it's really important feedback for schools, for school leaders, and it's one of the most actionable items we have found on the MDI that schools in particular take to implement social emotional learning, social emotional programs and strategies at the school level to improve the connectedness and to create a better and more inclusive climate for all children in the schools. The physical and health and well-being domain is a domain that is really interesting for our public health partners. So we have this approach. I'm in the School of Population Public Health, and our approach is really how can we support child health and well-being through education. So it's a public health approach through education. And of course, when we're talking about public health, some of the health behaviors, this also includes screen time, for example, which I don't think is listed here, are really important to measure. The MDI is implemented at the population level. So what we do is we invite school districts to participate. And if school districts participate, they let us know what grades they want to participate in. So they can participate with as many grades they would like to from grade 4 to 8. And for participating districts, the survey is implemented at a population level within that particular grade they want to participate in. What we do is we use a passive consent procedure. This year, for example, we had we collected data from about 50,000 children. 50,000 children is like a huge amount of data to collect. And as you can imagine, managing an active consent procedure would be very difficult. So we have an opt-out protocol, basically. Children, parents, teachers, school principals, they all receive all the information they need on the MDI. They receive the information that their district is participating in a particular year. And parents then have the option to say, actually, I prefer for my child not to participate, so they can withdraw their child. If the child is not withdrawn, then the child has consent to move forward to participate in the survey. However, we do active assent. So before the child participates, they have an option to say, no, I wish to not participate in the MDI. They can opt out. They can also drop out of the survey at any moment during the survey completion. So for at the child level, they can change their mind at any time. For parents, it's that period before the survey where they have to withdraw their child if they don't want them to participate. Our participation rates are fairly good. We have about 80% participation rate typically, which I think is really great for this type of work. It's implemented online, the MDI. So schools find a staff member who is responsible of implementing the MDI. In a given year, the staff member gets trained. They have opportunities to participate in training webinars, and they also receive resources. They receive lots of documents they need for implementation, and they gather the children in the school, often in the school library or in another place where they have access to a computer. It can also be done on the iPad. And then children have the chance to complete the survey over 1 to 2 time periods. There's a reading aloud option for children who just, it requires a little more work to read the actual survey questions. Especially in grade 4, there's still quite a bit of variability of how well children can read the survey items and understand them and process them. So yeah. Here are some example scales I pulled out. Okay, so this is the pro-social behavior scale. As you see, these are all kind of Likert scale items we ask. Most of them are completed on a 5-point format. So children are asked a particular question. For example, here, I helped someone who was being picked on. And there are different time frames we ask this for. So sometimes our time frame is in the last week. For some other domains, we ask in a typical week. Sometimes we ask, how often do you do this? So in this particular case, they have the option to say, not at all. I haven't done this at all this school year, once or a few times, about every month, about every week, and many times a week. I'm showing you here this item that I mentioned earlier, the presence of important adults at school. So here we ask children, are there any adults who are important to you at school? And we give them a little bit of an explanation. what that means. And then they can write in as many initials as they want. So here, what we do then for coding is we really are interested, like, who are the kids, or how many kids have no important adults at school, and how many kids have at least one important adult at school, and how many have two or more. Because what we have found is that there's a huge change in benefits for social emotional well-being. Children go from 0 to 1 adult in school. There's still some added benefit for children who report 2 rather than 1 adult in school, but the benefit is much smaller. And really the main thing is that making sure that every child has 1 adult they feel like who knows them, who cares about them, and who they can go to if they have a problem. Here's an overview of the self-regulation items. And I don't need to read those out loud. I just want to give you a quick snapshot. Also really important for you to know is that the MDI survey is available on the help website, so you can take a look at this. It is copyrighted, so you can't just go ahead and take the survey and implement it. But if there's anything you would like to do with the MDI survey, we have, for example, licensing options where sometimes sites that are outside of British Columbia, when either researchers or when entire schools or school districts want to participate in the MDI, we have put into place a licensing option so that many different communities, even outside of BC, can participate in the survey and can use the resources through the licensing. Okay, peer relationship items. They are part of connectedness and friendship intimacy. And satisfaction with life, of course, that's one of the well-being domains we were interested in as part of positive user development. Okay, and here, this is a different section I'm showing you here. These are some structured out-of-school time questions. This is part of the experiences in your community domain, where we really are interested to know who are the kids or how many kids are actually participating in organized out-of-school programs. We know that organized out-of-school programs are an important part of positive youth development. So we ask children, like, are they participating? And if yes, how many days are they participating? Gives us a really great overview of what are the activities children are participating in, and also how often. And it also allows us to look at the overscheduling hypothesis to see, is it really that, or how many activities are children doing? And are some of the children maybe doing too many organized activities? Because we know that it's kind of like this Goldilocks phase where, yes, more is better, but too much is also can take away time from other activities and also from academic learning, of course. We also measure unstructured school time, and that's also where, for example, time on computers, on phones, social media, but also time to just play at the park, hanging out with friends, religious, cultural activities, so any sort of unstructured activities that take place during out of school time and that are important for developmental health and well-being are measured. Okay, our tool, the MDI, closely aligns to the CASTLE competencies. So some of our domains load on the social awareness, self-management domains, responsible decision-making, relationship skills is probably where we have all more items that are relevant for relationship skills, because that's where we also have all the connectedness items that are relevant here, and social awareness. Here's a quick overview of how we can roughly, sort the different items into the different domains. This is really important for teachers in schools, because teachers, often in British Columbia, we have each of the districts has a social emotional learning like district principal, someone who really focuses on how can I advance social emotional learning in my district. And they often work with a theoretical model, and they really want to see, okay, how can I touch on all the different parts of social emotional development when I put into place programs, strategies, training for teachers, and so on. So in order to kind of have this uptake of the MDI in school districts, it was very important for us to show that it speaks to the different social emotional skills that are also theoretically founded and by the collaborative of academic and social emotional learning. This is just a snapshot here of British Columbia's curriculum, and I'm showing this because about 5 5, 6, 7 years ago, the entire curriculum was revamped. So the curriculum was changed so that now basically what is mandated is that BC schools teach core competencies, and the core competencies, one particular domain of that are personal and social skills. And this includes personal awareness, social responsibility, personal, a positive personal and cultural identity, social awareness, and teaching these skills, of course, is really important for teachers and for schools. But what teachers and schools struggled with for a long time was to say, okay, this is all great, but we actually don't have data on these particular competencies. And this is not, it's not as, how do you test this? How do we actually, what do I give children to actually get some data from the kids to see how they're doing in these particular domains and competencies, and how things are changing over time? And over the years, are we, is it actually changing that we now have this as a particular area in our curriculum that needs to be taught? So this is where the MDI came in, and was also, I think this is also one of the reasons why there was a lot of uptake on the MDI in British Columbia, because it addresses several parts that are mandated in the curriculum. So what we do is we report our data back to schools and to school districts and communities. So there are two types of reports, and I'll go into that a little bit more later on. But what is important is that in the report, we try to summarize the data in a way that is interesting for schools and districts and makes it actionable. We do also give them a breakdown of how the children scored on each of the measures, and what percentage of children is low, medium, and high on each of the measures. But we also want to summarize the measures a little bit so that the stakeholders don't have to look at like, okay, here's the optimism, and here's the satisfaction with life, and here's depressive symptoms, and here's the anxiety, and how do we all kind of summarize this and come up with like a more coherent story. And that's why our knowledge mobilization team, we have a great team at the Human Early Learning Partnership that really focuses on knowledge to action. They came up with these ideas. We need a well-being index, and they collaborated with researchers in our unit to come up with a way to form a composite around optimism, self-esteem, happiness, the absence of sadness. So it's kind of the depressive symptoms or sadness items are reversed, so that we look at the absence of sadness as an indicator of well-being and positive general health. And these are kind of summed up in a way based on cutoffs to decide what percentage of children are high in well-being in a school, low in well-being, or medium to high. This we find has been a really important way to communicate our data to schools, because it makes it really visualizes the social emotional well-being of children in the school and makes data very actionable. And a second index I think is important to point out here is the assets index. So coming from a positive youth development approach, we know that there are lots of different assets that relate to positive youth development. If the assets are in place, then positive youth development trajectories are supported. So the 4 assets we measure on the MDI are relationships with adults, and this is at school, neighborhood, and at home. Then peer relationships, which consists of the belonging items and friendship intimacy. Then another asset is the nutrition and sleep asset. So that's a health behavior asset. Are children eating breakfast every morning? Do children have meals with adults at home? How often do children get a good night's sleep? And then the last asset are the after-school activities. Are children participating in organized activities outside of school? Since we know that that's a way to use time constructively. And it relates to positive youth development. And what we then give schools is we give them like this little cube here you see in the middle with those 4 different tiles, and the tiles are color coded. And if children score high on an asset, they have the darkest brown color for that asset. If they score low on an asset, if very few kids have the asset, the color coding is a lightest brown. So basically, at a school level, the darker the color, you can think about that as the more nutritious is the soil. The darker the color, the more children actually have that asset in the community and in the school. And it really, again, helps teachers and school leaders to take a very quick look at their data and understand what are the areas in which I have to work in my particular community of students. This is just some research here that connects the number of assets to the well-being measure in our research. So what you see here is the more assets, the higher the percentage of children who actually report that they're thriving in school. Okay, a quick snapshot here of participation. This is this slide doesn't have the last couple of years yet. I think 2021, 22, we also had around almost 40,000 students, and this year we had 50,000 students participate. So you see, since 2009, which is the first year when the MDI was implemented, there has been a steady growth over the years in MDI implementation and in MDI participation uptake. That's really great news. And it also really means that the survey is working for school districts. So school districts find this data useful. So they actually are the ones who are approaching us. We just send out a call and we say, okay, we're open for registration for districts who want to participate. And districts are the ones who approach us and says, yes, I'm interested in participating with these and these years this year. Lots of districts have started coming up with a pattern that they participate, let's say, with grade 5 in 1 year, and 2 years later, they participate with grade 7s, because that's the same kids then, of course, over time. So they can really see, okay, how are the kids who were grade 5, how were they doing on well-being, connectedness, peer relationships in school, and how are they doing today that they're in grade 7. So it helps the schools and school districts to really also look a little bit at their own trajectories in their school. But let's go back to reporting here. The reporting is what is important here to keep in mind is that we don't actually report about individual data. So teachers won't be able to see this is how an individual child scored on the MDI on different measures, but data are only shared in an aggregated way. The reason here is, of course, privacy concerns, confidentiality, but the MDI was really developed to support policy, program, practices, and to promote change, but at the systemic level. So it's not an individual assessment or a diagnostic tool. And we have 2 aggregations. I mentioned this earlier. One of them is the school reports, and the other one are school district and community reports. The school report, each of the schools get their own school report, where if they participated with multiple grades in that year, they actually receive multiple school reports. And for the school report, all data at the grade level are aggregated. So the school will know this and this percentage of my grade 5 students are reporting that they have at least one adult they feel connected to at school. This is how this is the percentage of children in grade 5 who are high on well-being, medium well-being, low in well-being, and of course all the other questions that are broken down by items. For example, what percentage of kids watches television and interacts with social media for how many hours every day. So all of these questions are aggregated at the school level and reported to schools. The school report goes to the school only. So the school knows their own data and they know the district average. The community and district report, that's a report that is actually public. We post these on our website. So others, like stakeholders, government stakeholders, other knowledge users in the community can go ahead and they can look at the district report and use that data in the ways that is useful for them. At the school level, we don't make these reports public. This is really important to us because we would be concerned about ranking, about comparison between schools, and we would be concerned about the way data might be used in a way that they're not intended to be used. And therefore, that's confidential. But what we do encourage schools to do is we encourage them to actually take the MDI school report and talk to the teachers in the school and share it with parents at a PAC meeting, share it with students, having meetings with important stakeholders to go through their school report and look at their school data together. Okay, we also have developed an interactive dashboard. This has come up in the past few years where more and more stakeholders were saying, okay, great, you have all this data, but I kind of want to, I have more questions. I would like to know this question or this reporting here you're doing in the school report, but I would like to do this separate by for boys and girls, or I would like to look at the trajectories in a different way where I really connect different data points over time. And of course, in order to do that, there'll be so many analyses required that it's just not feasible for our data team to do all these particular individualized analyses for partners. And therefore, we've developed an interactive dashboard. The snapshot I'm showing you here is the EDI dashboard, not the MDI dashboard. But the MDI dashboard will be very similar. Reason is that the EDI dashboard just came out last month, and the MDI dashboard will be out at some point later this spring or summer. And the MDI dashboard will really allow knowledge users to go online, to select their district, or to select their wave, select the grade level they want to look at data at, connect different points, and get a really nice opportunity to interact with their own data. We also offer webinars where we share data with any stakeholder that is interested to participate, and where we also look at trends over time and try to see what are the most important learnings from a given year from our MTI data. So we really try to continue those partnerships with our stakeholders and knowledge users. And this is also important for us because that way we also can make sure that the MDI is staying up to date from year to year. We just last year had some revisions we made because after about a decade, we felt like there's just some measures that are missing and there are some that are maybe not needed anymore. For example, we took in a question where we asked children about concerns about climate change, for example. Okay, so let's take a quick look here at trends over time. Okay, so what you see here is you see 4 consecutive years from 2019 to 2022. These are all data from a large number of districts. And what is being shown here is the percentage of children who are thriving. So this is the well-being index that is being shown here in the different bars. So the percentage of children that are thriving, you see that in grade 4, it actually stays quite, it actually stays quite stable. There's a bit of a drop, which is likely related to COVID. The 2021, no, sorry, the way it's implemented during the school year, the 21-22 data collection would have been the first one that captures the changes that captured experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic. So you see quite a bit of stability in grade 4, but then you see as kids get older and in grade 7, it's really obvious here. There's a declining trend in well-being over time. When you can't see it as well, but the drop is the largest here during the COVID, during the time where children were in the middle of the pandemic. But also unrelated to the pandemic, the decline has already started before the pandemic started. So this is really important for us to know. And it's also, it has been a really important discussion in school districts. Okay, what's going on with our children? Why are things well-being wise getting worse for grade 7 students? How can we explain these findings? And it has prompted some really good discussions around social media, screen time, but also discussions around, our children having fewer opportunities to be outside, to play outdoors, to be engaged in meaningful ways in their communities. The reason why we have only 2 bars here for grade 5, 6, and 8 is that it's fairly recent that we have switched to a system where the MDI can also be taken in those grades now. Initially, we only had the 2 years, grade 4 and grade 7. And then because schools provided this feedback, they really would like to do the MDI, but with different grades, we opened it up more and provided this opportunity also for other grades to participate. And we find actually that by this year, the pattern has shifted so that most of the districts want to participate with grade 5 and with grade 8. For the grade 7 decline, I want to show you here that, just in case you're wondering, the decline in well-being has affected all of the domains that go into the well-being index. Maybe the least so for general health, but definitely for the other social and emotional well-being domains, there has been a steady decline over the years. We also do research with the MDI. That's, of course, secondary research. So all the data that are collected are hosted on a secure server by PopData BC. What we can do is we can request access. Our students can request access. We can collaborate with others to come up with projects where we link the MDI data to Statistics Canada data or to other tools through identifiers that are removed from the files that I would see, but data stewards can connect the data to other data from children through the identifiers. For example, health records is one of the linkages that has been quite popular in order to understand the connections between MDI data and other domains of development and health experiences in life. I mentioned this earlier, that knowledge to action is a big focus for us. And our goal here is really to move from a point where schools are responding and intervening to a point where schools have prevention in place and don't need that lifeguard approach in the end. So the idea is really, how can we prevent issues from happening? How can we flag this in our data earlier? So for example, if we see early on that schools are struggling regarding connectedness, children are reporting that they're not connected to peers, that they don't feel like they have an adult at school they can talk to, and that bullying levels are high, then schools can go in and can actually work on with different domains. They can implement strategies and approaches to improve the school climate. They can do some very specific targeted approaches to actually help students to feel more connected. Some of these are like the weekly assembly, for example, that we've asked teachers, what is it actually that you do, like very concretely? And some of them do very simple things, or at least seemingly simple. For example, a weekly event where the entire school gets together. In my own kids' school, that was Friday Fitness. They got all the kids together on outside in the yard or in the school gym, depending on the weather. And they had a huge music setup where they were playing music then that, like, it was Zumba music, so kind of activating, fun, energetic music. And there was always one class who was leading this activity. And the activity was basically like a Zumba or aerobic series to this music, which was a lot of fun. It was always the same series. So kids kind of started picking up on it. They started singing along, but they were also doing all of this together as a school community. And it was quite a fun, social, physically active also way to start the day, which provided lots of benefits for the kids on so many different levels. It was actually not too much effort. It was really just mainly putting up the music, getting everyone in the gym. It was half an hour and then everyone was back into their classroom. And the experiences they had during an event like this, and the experiences children have when they're part of a larger school community, are very powerful in terms of connectedness. Because it's really hard to meet with each of the school districts and school district leaders individually to give them advice and input and guidance. And because of that, our Knowledge to Action team has developed this great guide here, the Discover MDI. It's a field guide of how to support social emotional well-being and social emotional learning in the school setting. It's available online, again, on the website. It's a resource. So school districts can actually download it. There are workshops for teachers around professional development. There are activities. There are also suggestions of what you could be doing to improve, for example, the school climate. There are also more additional resources or templates to adapt and adjust, to make it your own, to create your own workshops or resources that match your school. The Discover MDI has been really important for us to, really get the knowledge to action started. We've also had a chance to talk to school district principals and interview them and have them share their success story with the MDI. This is something that has worked really well for other teachers and other schools to say, okay, this is what this other school did. This is what they found really helpful and useful from their MDI data. And this is how they were able to make a change. Just thinking of a few specific strategy that we work with when we talk to schools. One of it is really, you can see the MDI as a way to understand the student perspectives. So what we do here is we kind of flip it around, and students are now our teachers. They're actually telling us what they need and how they're doing. So our job here is to listen, and looking at the MDI data is one of the ways to listen. And then also to act accordingly, and to hear what children are saying, and to recognize it, and to make an attempt to change. The MDI, I think an important part is really to see the areas that are popping up in schools that are strength already. So we always encourage schools to start by saying, okay, what are we doing already that is going really well, and how can we see that in our MDI data? And maybe some of the schools see that they score really high and above district average on school climate. And then they can think about what are the things we're doing to actually get there, and they can make sure that these are things that are not cut during annual budgets, and these are things that they can continue to further build on to further capitalize their strength. And then also to see, okay, what are some areas where we're not doing so well and where we can actually work on, and then connecting with other schools to see what are some strategies they've been using, learning from peers, or trying to bring in new programs and new strategies to address these problems. One thing, the MDI really focuses on the children, but we have found that it has actually been quite a good opportunity for teachers to also reflect on their own social emotional learning and social emotional well-being. So sometimes teachers say, okay, this all makes sense, but now I'm wondering, how connected do I feel to my colleagues, and what can I do, or what can we do as a community of practitioners in a school to form a better climate and a better sense of belonging for ourselves? So we feel like the MDI has really been a jumping board into these conversations without directly measuring how teachers are doing. So when we think about social emotional learning, and this is a nice image here from Castle, we really want to think about it in the entire context, the SEL of the students, but also of the educators, and also of the larger learning context, the school as a school system. Partnerships have been really important in developing the MDI, and they're really important in using the data. So we really encourage schools, go and talk to your partners, go and talk to community organizations. Some of the schools are actually community schools, so they kind of function also a bit as like a community hub, community center, which makes it really nice to connect with other community organizations and share the school data and talk about the school data and see how we can together catalyze action. Also I think the partnerships are a great opportunity for schools to voice where they need more support, and finding external partners who can maybe provide that support. One of the messages that comes back so many times in the MDI at a level of the child, but also at a level of this entire project, and at the level of like, how do we build healthy schools? And that's really that it takes a village, it takes so many different ingredients and components and contexts to come together to form healthy schools where children can learn socially and emotionally as well as cognitively. And for that systemic change, it requires like multiple partnerships. And one of the partnership that is really important for us is at the government level, and that's kind of that most outer level, in the Bronfenbrenner system, like that's, when you think of that Bronfenbrenner ecological contexts model, the outer layer, that's where the policies are. And I think if we want to achieve change that is sustainable and that really lasts over time, and that is guided through healthy policies and healthy principles, then we really need to make that systemic change. What you see here is that the government actually, over a couple of years, worked on a mental health strategies in school. This was a collaboration between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health, and I think the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. So they all came together and they said, okay, rather than seeing children either in education or in health or regarding their mental health and addictions, we need to kind of all come together to think a bit more holistically and come up with a strategy to support mental health and well-being through schools, because this is the population approach. This is how we reach most of the children. Some children are home learners, but even those mostly are connected with schools in some way, and even if it's just like that they're registered home learners that are still in contact with the system and receive resources through schools. Okay, so this is kind of, I'm towards the end of my presentation here. I just want to show the field guide again here, this message, let the data lead you to your discovery. It's a really important part for the MDI, because in the end, the MDI is really only worth it if we feel like, yes, it's making change in communities. Yeah, it needs to go way beyond a tool that is used for research. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Eva, that was incredibly succinct and to the point. So thank you very much indeed for that. Yes, let's get some questions. And as usual, I'll start with Federico.
Can get the microphone. Let's turn this off. So thank you very much, Eva. My name is Federico. I've been working with Paul and EEF to organize this event, and I'm very glad that we came across your work. It clearly resonates with what we have heard these days. The first question that comes to mind in the context of this event is if you can tell us more about your partnerships with other institutions outside of Canada and of British Columbia. Of course, it seems like it's a tool that's been developed from British Columbia for British Columbia, but there are lots of interesting things. So if you had any feedback from international partners about how salient it is to them, how relevant, because not necessarily, I mean, we've been talking also a lot about measurement in variance, but it's probably your community approach probably doesn't necessarily lead to international comparisons. It's really a tool for your community to improve or to spot areas for improvement. So can you tell us a bit more about how international partners use the project, the tool, what they've learned from it? Did they go back? Are there partners that are using it over and over, and so on?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And yeah, you're right. I didn't actually mention that in the presentation, that yes, it was developed in British Columbia. However, I would not say that it is a tool that is just relevant to our community. The MDI has been translated into different languages. I mean, also in English, it's of course implemented in the United States. It has also been implemented in Germany. It's been implemented in Switzerland. We have an Italian version of the MDI. There's a French version of the MDI, but that's been implemented within Canada, but in Quebec. But that's also, culturally a bit of a different context within Canada. It's been implemented in Israel. So all of these different sites where it has been implemented have basically they've approached us and they've been saying, okay, we want to do something like what you've done, and we need a place to start. They've collaborated with us in often minor adjustments have to be made to the MDI, specifically, for example, for the out of school time section. Out of school time looks very differently in different countries. And yeah, so I think one important part, all of the contexts I mentioned now are also somewhat, Western context, culturally speaking. So, and I think that's an important part to consider. I have a doctoral student who actually translated the MDI into Urdu, and she implemented it with children in Pakistan, in Karachi at a large scale. And she's just in the process of looking at her data, but we really found that was like a very ambitious project. And the ambition here was really to see how do these different concepts that are often like very individualistic questions, but that's more, I don't think that's Canada specific. That's more like a individualistic versus collectivistic perspective. But how do these concepts translate into a very different culture? And what if the questions are and are not meaningful? Which of the practices are maybe just different in different cultures? For example, in the Urdu context, a really concrete example was that this the question to what extent students feel like they feel cared for by a teacher. That wording was incredibly difficult to tap into, because care is really something that teachers shouldn't give in that context. Care is something that family gives, and the teacher just needs to teach. So it's just the academic focus here, and children in the focus groups kept saying, well, I'm not sure why you're asking me why if a teacher cares about me. Of course they don't care about me. They shouldn't care about me. It's not their job to care about me. And when we heard that, and my student, she grew up in Pakistan, she's originally from there, Salima, she said, I know deeply that, of course, students, of course, teachers care about students and students feel cared for, but you can't say that, you can't put it into that language. So it was very hard for us to tap into the similar context in a culture that is such a different culture.
Thank you. Thank you. And of course, Thailand can relate to being a very different context from British Columbia, but it's encouraging to see that there have been other countries. We have had, I don't know the scale of these applications, but I assume once you start undertaking such a project, you do have a minimum idea of a sizable scale to have an impact. And the other question I had was about, in terms of outputs. So you said the lowest level of aggregation is the school. I'm wondering, when you're a teacher in a big school, is it really that informative to you? Couldn't there be a report at class level, which might be more relevant for a teacher? And for the students themselves, you do collect critical data that may help flag some students that are particularly vulnerable. Isn't it a little bit, I'm sure it must have been a tough choice when you decided not to use individual students' data at all, because you could identify very vulnerable students and help them immediately, rather than hoping to go back at system level and hoping that policies will somehow reach them.
Yeah, it's, basically the project as it is designed currently as a population level project with so many participants in the province would not be feasible if we literally looked at every single individual data to identify individuals and, let's say, refer them to a school counselor and so on. The only time when we identify an individual is if they complete on the last page, there's a page they complete, they can complete where they can indicate that they're struggling, that there's an adult they would like to talk to in their school. And then we make sure that those children actually get access to someone they can talk to. Often that's an opportunity then to actually meet with a school counselor if the resources are there, or some other staff that can connect and check in with the child. We have a couple of open text boxes, and what we have found is that sometimes out of context, children will use the text box to write something in to flag to get our attention because there's something they want to tell us. For example, sometimes we have found that in an open text box, and we need to look at these because children might be indicating things that are really important to attend to. So in an open text box, children have, for example, indicated intention for self-harm or just more severe like comments around not feeling safe or not being safe somewhere in the school or in the home and so on. And when we see that, when we feel like, okay, there's a concern here either for the child or for someone else, then we reach out to the principal, and we actually have to then go through a data steward, which is it's a bit of a lengthy process, and we have to actually also connect with ethics to let them know, to identify that child and pass on that name. This is really just if children write something in a text box. But if we were to comb through 50,000 data points to identify individuals and to find more like a targeted follow-up or treatment approach, it just wouldn't be, that's not how the project is designed. So I think the project is really designed to change policy and to make systemic change. The classroom, the school level is the smallest level. And we have found that schools find it's a really important starting point, the MDI data. So they start with the MDI data and then they can actually go ahead and dig deeper. And yes, some of the individual things children are feeling and saying are not showing up in that aggregated form. But that's just work at a different level that we can provide with the MDI.
That's great, thank you. Are there more questions? I have some. I was very interested in the slide which showed the way in which the well-being indicators declined as they got older.
Right.
And the intense discussion this had led to in British Columbia as to the causes of it. I have seen a lot of similar data in research that we've done over the years, but reading other people's. And maybe this is an area for more international sharing of data, is that maybe grade 8s are just more miserable than grade 4s, and we needn't necessarily angst about it.
Yeah, so I think I have two comments about that. One of them is the developmental change. Grade 4 students, on average have higher well-being, higher happiness levels than the grade 7 and grade 8 students. So that's a developmental change that we've seen for many decades, going through the early adolescent years, that well-being declines, children become more self-aware, maybe in some sense also more realistic in their own assessment of their own world, and they understand a little bit more of what's going on around them. But I think the concerning part was the change over the years. So the grade 7s in 2018 and 2019, 2020, 2021, so the change across those years within the grade 7 group, that every year the grade 7s of that particular year reported lower levels of well-being. And that's, I think, the trend that is concerning, and where we need to ask, why is there that societal change? Why are the grade 7s of 2019 reporting higher well-being than the grade 7s of 2020? And of course, the COVID dip is like one of the things we can argue is like we can understand as a society, but it started even before. And I've just research-wise, I've run analyses where we can really see that this decline started in about 2014, 2015, where we see like a pretty clear trend over the years within a grade level. I think this is important to look at and to have a discussion about. There are lots of different alternative explanations. It's possible that, with the MDI, we've brought a lot of conversation about mental health and mental well-being into schools. So now students are actually talking about this. They're understanding it. They're focusing on it. There's much less stigma. There's more of a climate where you can actually talk about sad experiences you have, or feelings of constant sadness, or reporting depressive symptoms much more easily than that used to be the case maybe a decade ago. So some of it might also be that, But I think it is more than that when we see like that clear trend over time. It'll be good for us because we keep monitoring it, of course, to see if the trend at some point flattens out, or where are we getting, or maybe things are going to be getting better again, hopefully.
I think it's a theme that a number of the presenters have talked about, which is how to use this information you've generated, and with parents and schools and different levels. And I think you articulated for me more powerfully the use of this data in engaging community. I completely believe in what you said, which it takes a village to bring up a child, and therefore you want the village to be involved. And it's not just in education, but other areas where you want the community to be involved. Is you ring up the community, he says, come round, I want you to be involved. And you all sit there and you go, what should we think about? And the problem is that the room is full of experts and the community. And it's, well, what should we talk about that we are all experts in? And I think what's really clever about how you articulated this is that actually this data is data the community would feel qualified to comment on, the social and emotional state of their children and the community and so on and so forth. And it therefore makes a great entry point for a discussion with the wider community about the purposes of school and what role school can play in this, as opposed to going, should we teach long division in grade 4 or grade 5? In which people go, well, I haven't got a clue. That's what you're here for. But this data is the basis of a meaningful conversation with the community that can lead to a much better joint understanding of what learning is and what the role the school can play. I really like that. Do you want to comment?
No, I think I think you're spot on here. That the community aspect, that the MDI measures the child within their communities, different communities, but there's also this community aspect of then we go and take the data out in the community. I think when you have an approach like that, you really need individual measures that can really be grasped by community members. That are not too abstract, and often it's really just a label of how we explain what these measures are. So, for example, when we go, when we go to community, they just really know what it means, like optimism. We don't call it satisfaction with life. We say happiness when we talk about the data in a community setting. So, really, just bringing community members in, because it also feels them like there's something they can actually contribute, and I think it really gives communities also agency. Rather than saying, okay, this whole like social, emotional, mental health stuff, this has to happen by experts, from experts, and we're not trained to do this. I find the way the MDI is designed, people feel like, yeah, no, I can actually talk about this data and I can relate to this. And I, as a teacher or as a leader in a youth organization, I have agency and I'm competent to work with this data and to contribute. So we also have in the past, and the YDI does that much more, have presentations and events where community members actually participate, so that it's not just the researchers talking, but that it's a few people who are contributing, including also the youth themselves, stakeholders, and everyone has an opportunity to to reflect what they have to add and contribute to the project.
Absolutely, and I think that's great, and I think that's a really interesting learning for EEF to take around this, because I think in many of the more remote areas of Thailand, I mean, Thailand is a country, as you probably know, of many ethnic minorities, and there's 67 different languages spoken in Thailand. And in the more remote areas, I think some schools have struggled to get good community engagement. And I think that this gives you a doorway into that, which I think is really interesting and is worth thinking about. On that note, as time has run out, I think we need to move on. Thank you so much, Ava, for getting up early and for sharing all that with us. We're obviously really sorry you couldn't come here for a few days so we could benefit.
I'm sorry too. I would have loved to be in Thailand for a few years. It just so coincided with other travel. My partner is traveling also to a conference, so he was first to lock in his commitment, and I'm here.
That's absolutely fine. But you've whetted our appetite to come to British Columbia, so we'll see you soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Bye.
And let's move quickly on. And Esther, who has sat here so patiently today, and yesterday and the day before, and chipped in with many important insights, it's finally your moment to put it all together.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I used to have the last lesson at the last day, at the last session. Like every Friday, I would teach live education to my students at the evening time. So everybody is very, very tired. So I'm very appreciate Nathan's exercise, like the mindful movement. And then can we do some mindful breathing, like use your belly? Use your belly instead of the this side to feel some deep breathing. Like use your belly to breathe deep, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in. So this exercise, I did it for some mindfulness practice on Friday. And then actually it is very scientific. So whenever you have a deep breathing, you get 36 ATP of energy rather than the shallow breathing of 6 ATP. So now you have a more clear mind to listen to my presentation. So I hope I can finish my preparation because I add from 40 PPT into 88 now. Because I learned a lot from the last two days and this morning, and then I keep tracking my data, and then, I can find the answer to that particular question. So let me see whether I can finish it. Okay. So I'm going to share with you about basically the Hong Kong experience of how we participate in different kind of student learning assessment and make use of them to inform our research, policy, and practice. And then, in fact, every country will have their own assessment system. It will be very different level, like the international level, you participate maybe in TEAMS, PISA, PEARLS, or HBSC. But also in your own national level, you already have your public examination or your lower stake national assessment at grade 3, grade 6, grade 9. And then you also have the teachers assess the students with some school-based assessment, or actually they don't need your instrument, they just observe the students or observe the participants. We just have a field right here, and then you can feel they're very tired, and then you can sense to what extent they can learn or their well-being, right? So I'm not obsessed with assessment instrument. Assessment, just like what I said last night, is that a proper assessment should not be make learning measurable. It should make learning more meaningful to the students and also to the teachers. What does it mean meaningful? That you can make use of that particular information regardless of it's a number or it's a wordings or it's a facial expression. You can identify those to help you to organize your teaching and the learning experience. And so let's start how Hong Kong used the international. I'm sorry, I think I skipped some. Right, and then I will talk about how my own agenda changed from some international cognitive measurement towards some more well-being measurement, and then all these kind of measurement, regardless of what kind of assessment, international, national, we can make use of that to identify, to clarify the system level quality. But what attracts me most is that as a sociology training background, I concern more about how those quality distribute between low SES and high SES students, boys and girls, immigrant, local, rural, or the city schools. And I also want to assess beyond the cognitive literacy or the competency to some non-cognitive one. Even when I participate in PISA for more than 15 years, I always identify those non-cognitive outcomes as an intrinsic value. Not that they can predict better performance in reading, math, or science, but they have their own intrinsic values, because when the students learn, when the students feel good, they can learn better, right? So I shift my focus more on the well-being, about like the life satisfaction of students, whether they feel they are healthy and whether they have mental or physical symptoms. That is those kind of concern that, just like our last speaker say, we concern about the mental and the physical, and so we always concern the body and the mind and how they connect. And also, build on the strength of those assessments, you can identify the strengths and weaknesses. It could be like Lathan sharing the individual level, school level, or the regional level. Like we can compare the East Asian countries, because they appear to be performed so well, always the top 10 in many international studies, like PISA, TIMSS, PIRLS. But you can always identify the weaknesses. So we can collaborate to do better job. And then, because every country will have your own agenda for education reform. Like Hong Kong, during 1997, we have the handover back to mainland China. We have a very big educational reform in every aspect. So we need some indicator, a particular international one, to tell us, are you working towards a good direction, a right direction? And then we also try to make use of those international participation, because actually it's very expensive, right? If you participate in PISA, you pay a lot of participation fee, TIMSS as well, PIRLS as well. But the most important and more expensive part is the time of our students. They spend 2 hours being assessed, and teachers to spend 30 minutes to do the questionnaire, and parents do the questionnaire, and the school. I think the school questionnaire is more complicated. We need a lot of assistance to fill the fact of the school. So it's a lot of time. It's very expensive, particularly the human's time. So you must make the best of it in order to inform the schools to improve. So I will show you some evidence based on this kind of participation in different level of student learning assessment to inform our policy. I'll just pick up one or two particular policy, and then how we make use of the item to inform our teaching by mobilizing relevant professional community. It's not, you have a particular target when you collaborate. It's not the general public in a general sense. If you are targeting the teachers to be improved, you must target the professional community of that particular subject. It's subject-based. So I hope I can have enough time to share all this. So this is the evidence of, based on McKinsey report, they make use of the PISA and TIMSS data to get to calculate a score. And then, as you can see here, Singapore and Hong Kong is the top two. And then actually both of us start from a fair achievement to the yellow one, good performance. Until the 2000, we have a great improvement. So it seems to be a good performance, right? Particularly if you are selling your education to some other place. So Singapore is doing a good job, and then you can invite a lot of these Thailand, Malaysia to visit their future school, and then do a lot of this training. Actually, assessment is a big business, not just for Singapore, I think, like many other countries. And I try to synthesize all different levels of assessment in a book in 2015 based on the invitation from UNESCO. And then you can download this student learning assessment in the website. And then what I want to share in the book is that actually in every country you will have your own special, there's no pointer, no cursor. Okay, so you can see here, like Hong Kong, we have kindergarten and 6 years of primary school, and then 6 years of secondary school, and then we have the university. And then on the right side, that is the kind of international student assessment we participate. PEARLS, TEAMS, PISA, and HPSC is the new one that I initiate in Hong Kong. And then we also have civic over there. And then actually in different level, you participate in this different kind of international studies and want to have some kind of information about the level of, like PISA is the reading, math, science, literacy, and then at the 15-year-old in Hong Kong is the model grade is at grade secondary 4, so that's grade 10. And for TIMS and PEARLS that you listened before is a bit lower level in grade 4 and then grade 8. HPSC is in primary school and junior secondary. So all this information can feed back to our system. And then in addition to that, Hong Kong have our own tertiary data collection, like what I just mentioned about the national examination, the public examination, right? So you can see, actually East Asian countries are obsessed with assessment, with examination. So we say we have this kind of examination fever. So that's why we spend a lot of time on drilling the students to the tests and to the examination. That's why we sacrifice a lot during our process for this kind of achievement. And okay, let's see. So the international, we talked about this already. And then, so who is responsible for different kind of assessment in Hong Kong? So like international assessment, the government delegate to independent institutions like Hong Kong, U and CUHK at my university. And then some national level examination and assessment by the government, the Hong Kong Examination and Assessment Authority. And then some delegate to the school teacher. We have a school-based assessment that is count as a certain percentage of the proper examination. And then we have a very comprehensive school-level monitoring system that collect not just the academic achievement, but also all kinds of well-being measure and the input of the school, the process of the school in terms of the school climate, and also the parental involvement, the homeschool collaboration. And then in the output area, we have academic achievement, non-academic achievement, and some others soft skills measured. And then in terms of the national level, we have proper examination, but examination is particular for the very high stake for individual because it certifies the students to graduate and then to get into a very prestigious university. So it's very selective. And then we have reform in our system that we changed from 2 examinations to single one, and then the students don't need to prepare for examination for so many times. But then we introduce a very interesting measure called value addedness that we control the student academic intake before we compare for the school. So we do have some schools that have very poor, very low academic input of students, but they still can have positive value addedness. And then if you get into their school, you really find the students is different. But the school teachers can attract the students to stay in school after school, and then to play with them with different kind of balls, and then invite them to the study room, and then they really start to study. With a very interesting design of the room, they have all glass, and then the people playing will see some people studying, and then they will take turn. So they do have a very particular strategy to demonstrate how to attract those low achievers to have the sense of belongings to school, and then they can start to study. And then this is the typical report now for the public exam. We have 4 subjects, 2 language, Chinese and English, and mathematics is the core. And then we have this liberal studies, but no more exists now because they are too liberal. I mean, people, the young people is too liberal. And then they have 2 or 3 elective subjects, okay? We do have a replace this subject by some other subject, okay? So this is the value-added measure that as a school principal and school supervisor, I am 2 school supervisor. Every year I will read this score, and then the x-axis actually is the subject. So every school subject teacher of this particular year is accountable to their performance. And then this is a value-added measure, means they control the intake of the students' academic. Like if they are low achievers, they already control in the multi-level model. And I teach this multi-level model in Hong Kong, but I don't have time to do it here. So if you see this I within the 0, that means this is the, how to put it, that means this is 0 value added. So you perform as predicted. That's okay, okay? 0 is okay. But if your I is lower than the 0, that means you are lower than expected. Given you have this student, you are expected to perform in the 0 level, but you are negative value added. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This 5 subjects panel have to see me and they explain why. And then those I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6 I above the 0, we will have a certificate and a tiny little souvenir to give the teachers. That is the norm I start to set up. So it's pretty effective, I feel. But of course, there's limitation of using this value addedness because you just really measure the academic score. It's not about well-being. And then you never know why some teachers can value add in the subject, some cannot. Sometimes teacher will use a lot of students' time after school. Like the science teacher always try to attract the students to in their tutoring class after school, and then other subject never have chance. So we have to do some kind of balance that to what extent you have the after-school tutoring for different subjects. So this is a very active teachers. They will spend their after-school time to do this private tutoring without any pay. It's not like other system that we don't charge anything extra. But the teachers really feel accountable. So they really try to let the student stay in the school. Like in my own experience, when I in secondary school, I always play different kind of balls. Whatever round, I will just like it. And then in the secondary, the third year of secondary school, my homeroom teacher said, Esther, you better spend some time in your study. And then I really appreciate that request. Otherwise, I just feel, oh, it's natural to play. No one requests me to study, even my parents, because I'm from a single-parent family. My mother is too busy with with her work. So because of these teachers, I learned that I can have a kind of balance of study and play, and then I start to have better performance because of these teachers all the way in different levels. So like some students with very disadvantaged background, you always need that kind of social capital. You can't have that binding social capital within your family, but you have that bridging social capital that inspire you that you can have some other aspects of development. So in Hong Kong, there's a lot of this kind of committed teachers. They really want to help and spend extra time to do a better job. And this is the way I, as a supervisor, will look into, like how this school in different subjects change over time. As I said, we start from 2000, we start to have this value addedness measure. So we scaled it is 5 is the average. If you are above 5, you have 6, 7, 8, 9. That is above the value addedness measure. If you are lower than 5, that means you are performing unexpectedly low. So you can see over time, these different kind of subjects from 2000 to 2006, almost all these subjects are really performing under expected. So finally, I have to change the principles. I recruit a new one. And then I really show not just 6 years, but 10 years of this marking. And then I discussed with her whether he had this vision to do some kind of academic improvement. Not just a caring school, but you must find a way so that the students have the basic capacity to get into university. It's a bit of kind of cool, and but it's also for the benefit of the students. So you can see some very bad performing. And then this school-based assessment in Hong Kong is become part of the public examination score. So this is the design. Like every subject, they try to have their own project. Chinese, English, mathematics, liberal studies. All of them have their school-based assessment. So this is a kind of formative assessment. They during the 3 years of the senior secondary school, they try to make the final exam lower stake, but make it as a continuous assessment, but it doesn't work very well. Like mathematics, what kind of project you want to do? So after the negotiation between the Mathematics Professional Association and the CDI of government, they decided that no need for any school-based assessment. So that is a very good rational decision. Like the government, particularly the Curriculum Development Office, will listen to the frontline professional associates' argument and rationale, and then they decide no project for the mathematics, but they still keep some for the Chinese and English and liberal study, particularly for liberal studies. They have an independent study project, and then we now we are even reforming into a much less percentage. So I say we must get the community involved, but that particular community must be the expert of that area. For if you're talking about science, talk to the science teacher, talk to the science professional association, and then they will have this kind of negotiation and review every 3 years, and then talk about how to make it better. And then this is the whole system of Hong Kong in monitoring school. Every school, primary school, secondary school, regardless if you are aided school or we call it more independent school, because you still get the subsidies from the government. You have to implement this monitoring. And like we have the input, process, output model, we ask the different stakeholders, the principals, teachers, to answer some questions related to what extent, how good is the management of the principal and the panel head. And then how about the curriculum and assessment in terms of this learning teaching area? And also we measure the school ethos by sending questionnaire to parents, and then they will have a particular form to evaluate the school. And then in terms of the student performance, we have this academic participation and non-academic performance and non-academic performance. Use a very long instrument called APASO. And then this APASO instrument actually evolved over time. I remember when we start to talk about self-regulated learning, we start to construct some of the items into this monitoring system and borrow some ideas from PISA to construct a instrument called self-regulated learning. So this performance, this monitoring system actually really modify over time and provide feedback to school, like who are you to provide feedback. So we are in the school management committee. We will read this in detail. And so this is I want to emphasize not just the academic performance, but also the non-cognitive one. And this homeschool. So in terms of international assessment, like PISA, I say it's very expensive. You conduct every 3 years, and then you are very busy with the huge data. So we must make good use of it. Otherwise, the data is over there, and then you never have happened in your own system. So I'll get through. And then for this particular project, they start from student and school questionnaire only. But for my own research interests, I integrate the parent questionnaire at the very beginning in 2000. So I got very interesting observation and make use of those information to inform the parents and also about the parent, the homeschool community collaboration policy. And then teacher questionnaire actually come later as a national option. And then in 2015, it changed totally to obviously call it computer-based, but still some countries can choose the paper form. And I don't want to talk too much about PISA because you know it much better. Like what I like PISA the best is the social gradient concept. This concept makes a very much difference on when we talk about, when we compare the educational system. And then let me show you this graph. I really like this one. This one is constructed by my supervisor in UBC, Professor Doug Williams. And then we always, as a sociology of education, we always concern how the performance distribute among the low SES, the poor children, and the high SES students. So he make this language visualized and becomes a universal language. And then you see here the x-axis is the school, the social background measured by the educational occupational. We have high C. We have occupation, we have education, and also we have the family resources and some other important number of books. Sometimes you get it into the index. So this index is very accurate. And then they try to put a very interesting, let's see whether that works. I want to show the graph. Can the back help me to do it? So every student will have their own social SES and have their own performance in PISA. And then if you dot all this on the graph, can you make it? Or I just skip to the next one. Can you just press to the next one with the country? Because it will take a long time, I know. But it's very fancy. That makes it, and then always enjoy seeing this little dot and then have the slide over there. But you can skip it and then to the next slide, please. So the major idea is that for every country's participate, you will have a social gradient like that. So if you are Singapore, your social gradient will be like this. That means high achieving students is more likely come from this high SES. Low achieving students from low SES. But like some very equal system, Finland, we say Finland is always the miracle because in 2000, they start to have the performance like that. That means the wealthy students and the poor students, the achievement gap is like that. And then they show the Germany like that. And then by that time, Germany said, we have to learn from Finland and also other countries. So everybody get to Finland, have a very enjoyable tour over there. And then that becomes a very interesting phenomenon, right? And then, can you get to the next one? Next one, please. They can't see my Yeah, this one will be very complicated. This should be the 60.
What's the problem?
How many minutes do I have?
Oh, right. Oh, right. Yes.
Next one. This one it will take a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, this one. Just help me press. Yeah. Okay. Stop there. Right. This is the fancy graph that my supervisor loved it, and I love it very much too. And then you can see every country will have their own social gradient. And then the red line, that is Germany. The red line is Germany. And the Finland is the green line. So you can see the star dot. Can I? No. Can I use pointer? No. Yes. Ah, right. You see this one, the green with the star. That is the average score. So you can see in 2000 at the very beginning, Finland outperformed all other countries, and also this high SES and low SES gap is much lower than Germany. So this is the way to visualize the equality issues. And then that becomes a popular language all around the world. I feel it's all around the world. So can you turn to the next? Because this one doesn't work. Yes, okay. This is the achievement gap between Germany, high SES and low SES, and that one is the Hong Kong. And actually, I present this slide to my government to convince them we should participate in PISA. And then you will see the white line over there. This is the hypothetical one. So you can see the white line is the tallest, right? The highest, and then the not so steep, right? But this is a hypothetical one. It never happened like that. But when I sell the ideas of PISA, I think this is a good one to bring in the language of equality into our basic education. So we are talking about basic education for 15-year-old. So this is a good one that I like PISA very much. So we bring in PISA to Hong Kong, and then we help Macau in 2003, and then mainland China have several provinces have the field trial. Actually, they used to have field trial before they really do it substantially, because they really want to know the performance before formal participation. Then Shanghai participated in 2009, outperforming every country. And then we try to have some kind of international meeting in Hong Kong, and then that's very interesting experience because I collect all the national report and then show on the site, and also I can invite very expert scholars to run different kind of assessment and analysis workshop that empower our own analysts as well. So this is in 2012. I think you have not joined. Not yet, yes. And but now I move to another direction, because in 2015 there's a very particular ethical issue. I feel that's not so good to participate. Like government start to collect individual school ID, and then I think that is not a proper way for conducting research. So we have a big fight, and then we start to talk about it, and then they really write on the contract saying you must provide it, and then I say, oh, that's okay, I don't do it anymore, and then I shift to another more interesting international study called HBSC. That's the initiated by WHO, and then there's over 40 countries participate, and then we can see more interesting findings like Actually, some people talk about the UK already have this kind of well-being indicators, and then also international organization like United Nations Children's Fund and the OECD also have this well-being measure. And then if you go back to the definition of WHO, you will find that health or well-being is not defined as a state. It is not defined as absence of disease or infirmity. It's more proactive. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So physical is part of my language. Always, this is very important. Not just social, emotional. And then, so the body and the mind are both equally important. And also, the definition highlights the multifaceted nature of health and pursuit of high standard of well-being. That means well-being has their own intrinsic value. It's not the instrumental value, oh, if you take care of the well-being, you have better performance. It's not like that. For holistic education, we take care of the whole body of the students, their mind, their psychological, social, and academic. So well-being is not just for survival or to serve for the extrinsic value or economic growth. And we participated in the trial in 2018, that's before the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we also successfully implement the main study in 2020. That's the main study during the COVID-19. So we do change the paper version of assessment into an online version. And then we got some funding from the governments. There's a PPR, is the policy-related grant. And so we try to inform the well-being policy of the school-aged children and inspire some new direction for school improvement beyond the academic performance. And then this is the conceptual framework I like to construct. Like the WHO don't have this framework, but I always say, oh, that's a different level of a social and economic context that we need to take care of. Like you must understand the family background, like the SES, the structure, whether the family communicate well with their kids, and also the peer context, and the online communication of peers, and also the school context, to what extent the children's engage in school activities, and then also to what extent the students and teachers support each other. And also, I need to control some student background, like gender, age, grade, immigrant status. And then we have different items about the health behaviors, like including the meal, breakfast, food consumption, even toothbrushing, and some physical activities. This is very interesting. And then we have bullying, fighting, the actual bullying and the virtual bullying. All these are in our data set. And then the kind of health and well-being measure that I construct here is the self-rated health, to what extent you feel healthy. Like the rate is from 1 to 4. Life satisfaction, you usually heard about it, 0 to 10. And then the health complaint, two measure. One is the mental syndromes. Another is the physical syndromes. So physical syndrome is whether you have stomach, and mental syndromes, whether you can't sleep well, something like that. And then we also have this as body image, BMI, the medical injuries, and social media addiction. Actually, is a very, very important predictors of the health, because like bullying is a very important issue now. Actually, the social media addiction is even worse after the pandemic, because everybody used the computer, some properly and some not properly. So what I say is this PISA, TIMSS, or HBSC, all kinds of international assessment is too expensive. So you have to make good use of it to understand your quality and equality of basic education. That is, you concern not only the academic performance, but the academic and healthy equity issue. And then whether boys are more healthy than girls, or whether the poor students are less healthy than the wealthy students. So that is what my concern. So we define the basic education not just by the competency or literacy, but also by the health and well-being indicators, and also this can provide very good information for us to inform our educational reform, and also identify strengths and weaknesses, and inform different stakeholders. So this is the messy educational reform since 2000. You can see the focus at the center is the student, and then we want our students can be lifelong learners, and then they need to know how learn to learn. That's a kind of meta connection. And then you can see this different square of reform. I don't have time to go into detail, but you can see how painful our students is, right? So this if the lifelong learners is unhealthy, that the process will be very painful and detrimental to your own country. So you must have a balance, like Thailand always like the Buddhism, like the middle way. Middle way is good. And then, so I make use of this international data to compare our East Asian countries to see whether they are really consistently perform over time, outstanding, and also how they perform in other non-cognitive outcomes. So a very simple one is that, yes, they are doing good. Academically, no, they're feeling bad affectively, okay? This is the evidence. So if you go back to the 2018 performance, you can see China, Singapore, Japan, Korea, and all these East Asian countries are the top performing countries. But if you get into this World Happiness Index, I highlight the yellow for the East Asian countries. So here you see Singapore is a bit better, 6.3, but still lower than the international average of, I think it's 7. And then you can see Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, and China and Hong Kong is the lowest. And so you can see that is the more updated scenario. So, but very interesting, Finland comes up to be the top again, not just this year, but over the past 5 years. So that's a reason for these Nordic countries always feel very happy. We have to study. And then I mentioned about the between school and within school variation. This is the evidence. So you can see all these top 10 countries, including Macau, Korean, Hong Kong, Japan, Chinese Taipei, Singapore, and Shanghai. All these East Asian countries have very high between school variance, even in 2012. And then the performance, the percentage of variance between school is far higher than the international OECD average of 36%. So you can see Japan is 53%. And Taipei is 42%. Can you see that? Over here. Over here. It's not very stable, this line. So this is the OECD average. So we say for a kind of system like this, we have a high academic segregation between school. That is no good. Because if you're a parent, you get into school A, that will be very different from school B. But if you get to Finland, it's regardless of what kind of school you get into, it's similar. Every school have a very high within school variation, but the between school variations is very low. Let me check. So, to what extent these school segregation really affect our students' performance? So you can see here, this is a multi-level analysis, and the outcomes variable is reading here, and then the average is about 546, and then every unit increase in the school mean SES, you will get a 55-point increase. So about 70 point is the whole proficiency level. So you can see how much is the mean SES affect the students. So that means if your system have very wealthy schools that collect high tuition fee, those schools are more likely to perform very well rather than those no school fee, and then very poor parents. And then if you get one more variable, the model 2 with the school banding, you can see the academic segregation is even worse. Like it absorbed part of the SES impact. And also, you can see the individual AAI means the student level academic intake, and the school banding is the school level academic intake. Those two predictors become very strong in the whole model. That means if your system is too segregated academically, you are likely to make the parents crazy, because the parents really need to struggle into a very high-performing school in order to guarantee a better learning outcome for their students, like Hong Kong. And then that is one of the problem of Hong Kong, that is the high academic segregation between schools. And then we also have some other problems that it's not our problem, it's the East Asian problems, that we have high testing anxiety, and then we have very low self-concept, as you can see here. And then for the reading, we have a pretty good reading engagement. We enjoy reading, we have reading diversity, and our disciplinary climate within the classroom is very good. So this kind of performance, this kind of indicators do help us to know a particular policy, that we have a language reform in Hong Kong during 2000, and then our language becomes more competence-based, more skill-based. And then, language, you always have this kind of appreciation of the traditional text, right? But then we try to skip all this and then really take language as a daily life communication tools. So we do have more different kind of reading assessment in our public examination. And then we also, you can also see, I don't have enough time to say this. And then, so the overview of the East Asian learners is that we perform well in math, reading, science. We find the academic segregation between school is huge, but we are decreasing. And then our social gradient at school level seems to be low in OECD's language, but actually within our country, the academic segregation between schools is still huge. So the international language talking about, oh, we are very equal is part of the story, is half of the story. If you dig into your own data, you will find another deeper story. And then our reading engagement is pretty good. And then the school climate, we have very good disciplinary climate. But if you talk about the affective outcomes, we are pretty low. And it seems that I skipped some. Let me check. Okay, how this international study inform our policy? So as you see, the academic segregation is very high in Hong Kong. So we do have a desegregation policy. And then this desegregation policy implement, and then we do see the evidence of reducing academic segregation in our PISA data. And also, based on my research, I have this parent questionnaire, and I also use that to inform the parent policy and fund my parents, and also use the health literacy to promote health literacy based on my HBSC project. So here's the one that in 2000, we reduced the school segregation from 5 banding to 3 banding. So the students are more homogeneous, and then we do find the reduce in the academic segregation slightly. And, but it's interesting, everything happened together. Like we still keep some very elite school, like the rest of the side school, they can collect their own tuition fee, so that makes the social segregation increase again. But if you look into this data, you can see the academic and social inclusive indices for Finland is the best. And then this Hong Kong, Macau, Japan, and Shanghai is lower. But then, if we get into the data of 2003 and 2012, you can find the between-school variance reduced from 4,806 to 3,934. That means reduced about 882. So it's reduced slightly. And so it makes us know the desegregation works to a direction that we like. But then you can see the variation between students still there, but the variation shift within school. So we have some kind of policy to provide more resources for school to deal with the learning diversity. And then the same is true for reading. You can see the effect of SES also go down substantially from 2000 to 2009. So this is a good way for reduce the segregation between school. But the school mean SES is still very significant and substantial. And then for the parental involvement, actually we have this education decentralization reform since 2000. It's start from 1990s. That is based on the school-based management. We try to invite more parents to participate by establishing PTA and the parent council, school councils. And then you can see in our policy, we try to explain the role of parents, not just as teacher of their own child, but also as partner in school. So we get more and more volunteers in school, and then they can get into the school management board. So now our school management board have 2 parent representatives, and then they can, through the monitoring system, they can evaluate school performance. And also, as client, we are accountable to them. We have to release the school report to the parents, and then they can choose. As consumer, they can choose school A and school B. And then also some parents can be advocates. Like we don't like the national assessment in primary 3. Some parents will aggregate together and try to negotiate with the government. So the parents try to do beyond supporting their own child, but also support the children in the school or in the community. And then the key findings about parental involvement in PISA, showing that the home-based parental involvement really help students' performance, even in the secondary school level. So we try to make use of those findings to produce this kind of little leaflet. And then in every leaflet, we will give the parents some hints. What can you do to promote the students' reading interest? And what can you do to promote the science interest? So we try to make use of this to inform the general public. And also in terms of this HBSC, I hope I have enough time to do it. And I try to make use of this information, the research findings, to inform the primary, secondary, and also the university level. So what I do is that similar. I try to make use of it to inform the educators and researchers, teach them how to analyze the data, and also prepare this professional development workshop for teachers and for individual school reports. We have school seminars, newspaper, newsletters, and also the well-being workshop and life education program I just designed last year to try some mindfulness practice in the school level, and also design some school-based improvement project. So this is the one that I'm going to do on Friday, on the coming Friday. That is for the middle managers of a particular school sponsoring body. They have about 11 primary schools. So I try to accept those invitations if they concern about well-being. So this is a way that to deliver your message better to the general public. And also this is a kind of a very brief results. So we measure life satisfaction 0 to 10, and then Hong Kong is much lower than the HBSC average. We have 6.9, and then the HBSC average is 7.6. So that's alarming indicator. And then we also trace how this life satisfaction change over time. So 11, 13, 15 is our sample. And then I also compared that with the PISA 2015, and then you can see the trend is really consistent. As the students grow older, they get worse satisfaction. But our adult is even worse. We have 5.443. So what's a miserable life? And so the life satisfaction decrease when they grow up in Hong Kong. And then I try to compare the post and the pre and post COVID-19 period. And then interesting, I don't find any significant difference. So actually, I find this as a positive side because our school really take good care of our students during the particular period. So we keep on have this Zoom lesson, and then in the Zoom lesson, the teacher will observe. Sometimes they can observe how poor the environment, and then a school principal will mobilize some NGO and community resources to donate the SIM card. They don't have the internet SIM card, and then to donate some iPad, and also some donate canned food, to take care of every aspect of the poor children. So, so you can see the particular for the primary school, you can see there's no significant drop, and then secondary school maybe a little bit drop, but statistically it's not significant. And then this is the one that I want to respond to our colleague's presentation this morning. To what extent those health symptoms, physical and mental symptoms related to life satisfaction. So you can see our overall life satisfaction is more predicted by the general self-rated health, 1 to 4, and also the mental syndromes in Hong Kong. That means if you have a good body and good mind, so you're more likely to have a better life satisfaction. Of course, you can see here the gray effect is still there. Secondary 1, secondary 3 have lower self-satisfaction than the primary school. No gender difference, no immigrant difference. Nuclear family is more likely to have better life satisfaction. And if their SES is high, they are more likely to have higher life satisfaction. And this particular paper I'm going to publish is about the social capital that you nurture within home and school will make a huge difference. Even when you control for the background, you can see this family support have the highest standardized coefficient predicting the life satisfaction, followed by the teachers, and then the peers. The peer support and the classroom support is not so much, but still significant. So this kind of social capital is very important. But like we say, there's an erosion of social capital in many of our society, especially after during the COVID-19. Everybody's social distancing, segregated, and then now we are come back to our normal school life. And then how can we nurture again this social capital within their family and within our home, our school is very, very important. And so how to make use of these at the university level? I share the data with my university students to run different workshops to learn how to use the multi-level analysis. And also, I try to make some mindfulness workshop for my university students because they are really stressful. So the picture on the middle is the way I'm sitting there. It's quite fun. Actually, I do my practice over 10 years, and then I find it works, particularly for the clarity of mind, and then you can do your work more efficiently. For 3 hours of work, you can finish in 1 hour. And then some students are convinced. I make it too dramatic, maybe half. And then also design new life education course based on the UNESCO framework, like the intrapersonal competency, the interpersonal competency, and then the more ultimate dimension, transcendent level. And then I integrate my practice into the new course, and then I just run it. And then, yeah, it's quite interesting to me. And finally, this is my curriculum framework when I design my new course in the university level. But I also make use of it to design some school-based intervention. Like happiness is very important and have their own intrinsic value to me. So if you take care of yourself properly, have this kind of intrapersonal competency, you have the happiness moment by moment. But then if you go further, if you can have good relationship with your peers, teachers, parents, your happiness will be deeper, and that this is a kind of relational happiness. And then if you can go beyond yourself and your relatives and then take care of other people, the kind of compassion is beyond yourself and someone you know, that is a kind of transcendence level, and then that happiness is sustainable. That is my vision. So I better stop here, right? Because I still have a lot of slides, and I see you here.
Well spotted. We are running short of time, and I did want to allow a bit of time for questions, if people have questions.
Yes, they do. Well, thank you, Esther. This has been very interesting. I think what you showed about your conceptual frameworks constantly being shaped by new findings really resonates very well with what Professor Vichart was saying on the first day. So the double feedback model, that at some point when you do identify something that effectively, positively affects changes, then it can be feedback to the conceptual role and really the high level framework for a system. I had a question. I mean, the data you showed about the potential impact of COVID is very striking. So I had to ask, when was the data collected in 2020?
What is it?
The comparison between 2018 and 2020 to show that COVID didn't have a massive impact on...
Oh, I think I did show the bar chart.
Yes, but when was the data collected on 2020?
2020.
Was that like
it's
January?
2020. Yeah, the year is 2020.
But like January or December? Because in December we stayed home much time.
I think it's June.
June. Okay.
June to December. Because actually we can't get into school anymore. The school closed again. We have to use the online version.
Okay.
So
it was already under lockdown and after already some time of being closed at home.
During the lockdown, yes.
Because lockdown started at some point in 2020. So it was so impressive to see that for some age groups it even increased that.
Yes, that's why I say, our teachers is doing a very good job. They always have this sunshine call to the individual parents. Like sometimes we have this parent legwork for a class of 40. Every 10 parents can have one coordinator, and the homeroom teacher can call the 4 coordinator and then make sure the other parents are okay. So they will have some call to the students, and also when they have this Zoom lesson, sometimes you can see a lot of people sit in. Sometimes mothers sit in and then really learn together with the kids, and then but of course there's a lot of conflict in the family because sometimes the poor family, the father lost job or the mother is too stressful because she used to go to work, but now she need to ask for leave to take care of the kids. So that's not so fancy, but case by case is different. But in general, we are handling pretty well. I think it's particular for school teachers. They are trying to do something really extra.
Yeah. And then the second question was about, there are hardly dramatic trends in international large-scale assessments. But the PISA data that you've been showing, they're a bit old. They're already 3 waves old. Have you looked at if the data have changed in the last waves, if there's an improvement in the countries that we are looking at, or it's comparable?
And it depends on what kind of data you're looking for. Like if you're talking about still reading math science, these traditional subjects, there's not much change. So you just do 3 times and then you can forget it. You will always like that. Like I think Thailand participated in TIMSS and PISA, right? For a long time. But then you skip the TIMSS, it's very expensive. And then, if you stick to PISA, I suggest you really dig into the data, make good use of it. Like have your subject expert teachers get together to study the released item. And then I did a similar project in Malaysia. They really get the leading science teacher to Penang, and then we have a group of 60, and then I bring my subject expert to help them understand the framework of the PISA item, like the item type, the kind of scientific literacy they ask for, whether it's identify evidence or is a kind of prediction. So they start to have this language to talk about their own school examination or the national examination item. And then on the final day, they start to design some PISA-like items in science. And then I think at least you can have the leading teachers to understand whether it's worth to invest your time. If you say, oh, this application of daily life is not our daily life, so forget it, and then don't spend your time and the money to participate anymore. Stick to your own national one that is more relevant. So we have to, we have to keep it really, have a critical mind to really understand what's the money and time spent for. And then don't just participate is a kind of habitual energy that you have to do some and then just stick to this one and then forget it. So I think it's not worth for doing international study like that and then spend too much time, not just talk about the money, that the time of the teachers and the students very, very precious. So I'm very critical, actually.
More questions. Ricardo.
Thank you for this. You talk about, I don't know if I understand well, but I think I heard that some voucher students has now access to private schools. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
and
how react these more rich communities to this action? What is the social reaction from these communities? Because these are schools that are more for rich people, no? And they are suddenly accepting students that comes with voucher, so more poorer students. What is the social reaction of that?
Actually, Hong Kong is a very international city. We do have very prestigious Hong Kong is a very international city. We do have several very international schools with high fee. How high is that? It's 200,000 Hong Kong dollar per year. And then that is only the fee, not the debenture. Debenture is even more expensive, million. So we do have this kind of demand. And then some parents really want to have this kind of social segregation. Of course, if you see every society, you need some kind of this. But still, some parents may not want their child to get into this kind of prestigious students because they don't learn something about how to be a good follower or how to be a good leader, right? So we do let this kind of private, very expensive international school exist in Hong Kong, but that's only several. And then I just talked about the direct subsidized school. That is promoted by our government in 1997 and implemented in 2000. And then some of the very traditional prestigious school, government school, aided school, that shift to this kind of DSS school, and then they start to collect different level of fee, but they are controlled by the government scale. And then they can't be so expensive like the international prestigious school, but still they will segregate some students. But Hong Kong is interesting. We have a lot of the religion school, Catholic school, Catholic and not Buddhist. Anyway, the kind of religion school, they really have the mission and vision to take care of the girls, the poor girls, or the disadvantaged boys, and then they stick to the mission, and then they never change to DSS, and then they keep their own way to run the school, and then keep it a very equal education system. So we have different kinds, like aided school, like the public school, we have about only 10%. And then we have a lot of aided school, about 80%, that is run by some private sponsoring body. Like my school is by a Catholic sponsoring body, and some by some NGO. So we have about 80% of this. All this pretty much like the government school. They get the subsidy per head, per student from the government, and then they, whenever we have reform like, we want to promote parental involvement, every school can apply for
That's
money.
very interesting. It wasn't the answer to the question. The
What?
question is, when poor children have started to get access to schools dominated by rich children,
No, I just say no already.
there's
Yes,
no reaction.
They can't,
There's no negative reaction
no,
from the parents.
because it's really minority. There's only several. We have over 1,000 schools in Hong Kong, and then as long as you pay, we don't mind you pay. So it's only several. So we don't say, it's no good to get angry with the wealthy people. I think they are okay to exist in their own way.
No, absolutely. But
Yeah.
do they get angry with the poor people?
No,
That's the question.
they don't care. They don't get angry actually. So, but like our public education system is still working very well. We are 90% of the whole population, right? So you can see on average, you are still perform pretty good.
Okay. More questions? I have a question. You showed a very interesting three-column chart of indicators that you have particularly used. And the last one was on social, on well-being. Right? And you had a list of indicators. All of them were hedemonic indicators. None of them were eudaimonic indicators. Right?
Eudaimonic.
Okay? You clearly have a huge eudaimonic issue. Because when you talk about this self-efficacy thing, what do we really mean? What we mean is children are really good at maths, right? But when you ask them, do you think you're good at maths? They say no. And when you ask them why they don't think they're good at maths, because they've got a very good score, they say, because I was forced to be good at maths by my teachers and my parents. That's what the self-efficacy indicator is actually showing.
Efficacy is not measured like that.
Okay, explain.
Efficacy is more accurate. Like if I'm measuring math efficacy, I will show the, you can say, I can show the equation. To what extent you think you feel competent to solve this equation?
Yeah.
And then our self-efficacy is pretty good. But it's only the self-concept low. That means
the self-concept. Yes,
that the
okay.
self-concept means
The self-concept.
Will your teachers give you a high score? No.
Yeah.
Our teachers used to give a low score relative to the
Yeah.
Western countries. So this is the kind of context they face the competition.
Okay, so the self-concept is teachers give me a low score. That's, I think I'm a low-scoring mathematician, right? But your score is very high. Can you explain this, child?
Yeah, I think like the little pond, the big fish, little pond, big fish. Like if everybody performs so well, like in my class, I'm in a very prestigious school, I get 80, but I'm still not good enough because everybody got 100, right? But if I, in a Brandfield school, a low achieving school, I get 80, I'm the top, and then I feel so good. So it's a kind of reference point that you have. Like as a whole, Hong Kong is pretty good, but relatively, if you Hong Kong as a reference point, you don't still every teachers won't give good grade, so that everybody don't feel good enough.
I think I interpret it very differently from that, and I've seen it in a lot of different countries and talked to a lot of children about what they think that means. And I don't think it means what you're saying. And I think the testing, the stress around testing is around they see the test as a control mechanism on them. That's what's happening on them. And it's undermining their eudaimonic thing.
Anxiety is also a very important disadvantage of the East Asian countries. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't measure eudaimonic. It's not in your indicators.
Actually, PISA 2018 measure eudaimonic, but that is not a very good predictor to achievement. Some positive, some negative, very controversial. So measurement for eudaimonic is not a good way. So not everything can be measurable. Like I do ask my young people, how do you define the source of meaning? With photos. That's very much more interesting. And then everybody send me 3 photos you find most meaningful in your life. And then most of them send pictures of family. Some that is a family relationship. Some show pictures of they graduate, some kind of achievement, self-achievement. And some hold their little dog, little cat, and then they find source of meaning by taking care of the little dog and little cat. So what I'm thinking, don't rely on numbers. When sometimes they're meaningless. If you measure eudaimonic, because you are searching for meaning of life. So I always use different kind of measurement that I feel that is more violent. Otherwise, you will have a very messy prediction of why eudaimonic is sometimes positive, sometimes negative. Very interesting.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Esther. You've been very inspiring and very challenging. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
There's now a short break of 15 minutes for coffee, and then when we come back, there will be a panel discussion. If you have any...
งั้นถ้างั้นเดี๋ยวช่วงนี้เราจะเริ่มเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะ Sorry we'll have to conduct this part in Thai and I know you have access to your interpreter into English but I was hoping we can do this in Thai and แล้วก็ช่วงนี้น่าจะเป็นช่วงที่ผู้ชมที่อยู่เข้ามาทางออนไลน์ไม่ว่าทาง Zoom หรือ Facebook กันนะคะสามารถฝากคำถามให้ได้แล้วก็ช่วงนี้น่าจะเป็นสะท้อนคิดแล้วก็ถ้ายังมีคำถามอะไรที่ยังค้างคาใจเนี่ยหวังว่าเราจะมีโอกาสได้ใช้ช่วงนี้ที่ใช้ในการสะท้อนคิดด้วยกันไม่ว่าจะเป็นเรื่องของการประยุกต์ใช้ไอเดียที่ท่านได้จากการสัมมนาทั้ง3วันนี้ใช้กับหน่วยงานของท่านใช้กับประเทศไทยหรือว่าใช้กับอย่างอื่นที่เกี่ยวข้องนะคะแล้วก็ในช่วงนี้เรามี panelist 3 ท่านนะคะที่จะช่วยมาสะท้อนคิดให้เราก่อนเป็นในเบื้องต้นแล้วก็หวังว่าแต่ละท่านจะได้มีโอกาสที่จะได้เพิ่มเติมไอเดียของตัวเองหลังจากที่ฟัง panelist แล้วก็ทุกท่านสามารถจะส่งคำถามเข้ามาในสไลโดยังได้อยู่นะคะแล้วก็เดี๋ยวทีมงานคงจะส่งให้แล้วก็ช่วงนี้นะคะขออนุญาตแนะนำตัวก่อนนะคะดิฉันดร.ชลิตาธัญคุปต์นะคะเป็นที่ปรึกษาด้านการศึกษาที่อยู่ที่กสศนะคะแล้วก็จะเป็นผู้ดำเนินรายการในช่วง panelist ตรงนี้นะคะของการสะท้อนคิดแล้วก็ขอแนะนำนะคะ panelist ของเราทั้ง3ท่านนะคะต้องรู้สึกเป็นเกียรติอย่างยิ่งนะคะที่จะได้รับการสะท้อนคิดนะคะจากทั้ง3ท่านขอแนะนำทีละท่านดังนี้นะคะแล้วเดี๋ยวขอเชิญแต่ละท่านบนเวทีเลยนะคะแล้วมีคุณครูนะคะ2ท่านก็คือท่านแรกนะคะคุณครูภูริทัศน์ชัยวัฒนกุลจากโรงเรียนเพลินพัฒนาค่ะท่านที่2นะคะดร.ณัฐฐาเพชรธนูค่ะท่านเป็นผอ.ศูนย์พิซซ่าแล้วก็เป็นรองผู้อำนวยการสำนักทดสอบทางการศึกษาสพท.ด้วยค่ะ Our colleague from OBEC Ministry of Education แล้วก็ท่านสุดท้ายนะคะครูเก่งคุณครูกิตติกรหงยิ้มจากโรงเรียนปากช่องค่ะงั้นถ้าอย่างนั้นนะคะอย่างที่เรียนไปแล้วว่าผู้ชมออนไลน์แล้วก็ผู้ชมในห้องเนี่ยยังสามารถส่งคำถามขึ้นมาได้ไม่ว่าท่านจะยกมือจริงๆในห้องหรือว่าจะส่งคำถามเข้ามาในสไลโดหรือยกมือใน Zoom นะคะเข้าใจว่าใน Zoom ตอนนี้น่าจะเปิดให้มีเสียงได้ถ้าท่านยกมือถามก่อนนะคะแล้วก็ถ้าอย่างนั้นตรงนี้คงจะต้องขออนุญาตเป็นคุณครูภูริทัศน์ก่อนนะคะว่าคำถามเนี่ยก็คือว่าจากที่ฟังการสัมมนาฟัง presentation มาทั้ง3วันแล้วเนี่ยได้ไอเดียเห็นไอเดียอะไรบ้างที่สามารถจะนำมาประยุกต์ใช้กับหน่วยงานของตัวเองได้แล้วก็ยังเห็นช่องว่างอะไรที่น่าจะเป็นทิศทางในอนาคตของเรา
โอเคครับก็เห็นประเด็นที่เติมเต็มกับงานของตัวเองหลายอย่างเลยครับก็คือในมุมมองของการสะท้อนในเรื่องของเด็กครับน่าจะมีมากกว่าที่เราเรียนรู้มาก็คือเรื่องของเชิงวิชาการใน3วันนี้ทำให้รู้เลยว่าได้เติมเต็มครบทุกมิติของเด็ก1คนที่เรียนรู้ร่วมกับคนอื่นในทุกมิติหมายความว่าเด็ก1คนนอกเหนือจากเชิงวิชาการก็มีแล้วอย่างเช่นพิซซ่าและตัวอื่นเนี่ยฮะก็ยังมีเรื่องของ well-being มีเรื่องของ EF ที่พัฒนาสมองสังคมอารมณ์ไปจนถึงความสุขเด็กในระยะยาวตรงนี้คือความเป็นมนุษย์ของคน1คนแล้วก็ความเป็นมนุษย์ที่จะเชื่อมโยงกับเพื่อนเชื่อมโยงกับครูเชื่อมโยงกับพ่อแม่อันนี้เป็นสิ่งที่สะท้อนให้เห็นว่าเครื่องมือประเมินแบบนี้มีความหมายกับชีวิตเด็กกับการศึกษาอีกอันนึงที่ได้เรียนรู้ก็คือสิ่งที่โปรเฟสเซอร์พูดทุกวันเลยคือไม่ได้มีแต่คำว่า summative เลยครับแต่ว่าเป็นการพัฒนาเพื่อ feedback ให้ได้พัฒนาอะไรบางอย่างไม่ว่าพัฒนาตัวเด็กพัฒนาครูพัฒนาโรงเรียนตรงนี้สำคัญมากเพราะว่าเราต้องมีหมุดหมายบางอย่างครับไม่ว่าหมุดหมายระดับตัวครูหมุดหมายระดับโรงเรียนหรือแม้กระทั่งหมุดหมายระดับชาติในการใช้เครื่องมือบางอย่างเพื่อให้มีหมุดหมายในการพัฒนาแต่ไม่ได้หมายความว่าเอาเครื่องมือเหล่านี้ไปตัดสินให้คุณให้โทษกับตัวโรงเรียนหรือตัวครูอันนี้คือผมได้เรียนรู้ในมุมของการประเมินเพื่อพัฒนาในชีวิตของเด็กทั้ง3วันนี้อันนี้ขอตอนนี้ก่อนครับ
ค่ะก็เท่าที่ฟังนะคะน่าจะตรงกับ presentation ที่สปีกเกอร์ของเราหลายคนพูดถึงว่าการประเมินเนี่ยไม่ใช่เป็นการตัดสินโรงเรียนหรือเป็นการตัดสินตัวนักเรียนซะทีเดียวมันมีวิธีการใช้ประโยชน์ข้อมูลจากการประเมินในหลายๆรูปแบบนะคะถ้าอย่างนั้นเดี๋ยวขออนุญาต ขออนุญาตท่านถัดไปนะคะอยากจะรับฟังความคิดเห็นจากดร.ณัฐฐาเหมือนกันว่าในฐานะที่หน่วยงานเนี่ยมีความเชี่ยวชาญกับการประเมินแล้วก็อาจจะมองเห็นทิศทางหลายๆอย่างในอนาคตหรือว่าบางอย่างอาจจะเคยทดลองทำมาแล้วก็เห็นประเด็นปัญหาอะไรบ้างท่านจะช่วยแชร์ได้ไหมคะขอบคุณค่ะ
ได้ยินนะคะค่ะจากการประเมินในระดับชาติที่ดูแลอยู่เนาะสิ่งหนึ่งที่เราพัฒนามาตลอดก็คงจะเป็นเรื่องของการประเมินในฝั่งวิชาการนะคะแต่ในระดับนโยบายในเรื่องของความปลอดภัยซึ่งไม่ใช่ความปลอดภัยเพียงทางกายอย่างเดียวยังหมายความรวมถึงความปลอดภัยทางใจซึ่งมันก็ตรงกับประเด็นที่เราคุยกันเรื่องของทักษะทางสังคมอารมณ์ซึ่งสิ่งนี้เป็นแกลบอย่างหนึ่งเลยเนาะที่เราพัฒนาเรามีนโยบายแต่เราอาจจะยังขาดการประเมินในระดับใหญ่หรือที่เป็นlarge scale ที่จะซัพพอร์ตข้อมูลให้กับระดับนโยบายว่าเมื่อมุ่งพัฒนาโรงเรียนที่มีความปลอดภัยแล้วเนี่ยผลมันออกมาเป็นยังไงอันนี้ก็เป็นสิ่งหนึ่งที่เราเหมือนมาฟังแล้วเราก็ได้ทางลัดบางอย่างที่เราจะได้เอาไปใช้งานจากการที่เราได้เรียนรู้จากผู้เชี่ยวชาญในระดับนานาชาตินะคะสิ่งหนึ่งที่เราได้เรียนเป็นทางลัดแต่ก็ไม่ได้หมายความว่าเราจะสามารถหยิบมาใช้ได้ทั้งหมดอย่างเช่นพิซซ่าก็เหมือนกันเรามีข้อมูลพิซซ่าเรามีปัจจัยความสำเร็จแต่ก็ไม่ได้หมายความว่าข้อมูลจากในระดับนานาชาติจะสามารถใช้ได้ทั้งหมดเราก็ต้องพยายามหาปัจจัยที่มีภายใต้บริบทของเราด้วยเช่นกันสิ่งหนึ่งที่เราพบจากการเรียนรู้ของพิซซ่าโดยเฉพาะเรื่องการอ่านเราพบว่าคะแนนในเรื่องของการอ่านที่เป็นประเมินและสะท้อนของเราเนี่ยค่อนข้างอ่อนด้อยเราก็ต้องเจาะลงไปว่าเพราะอะไรเราพบว่าบทอ่านของเด็กไทยเราเนี่ยเป็นบทอ่านที่อาจจะพบน้อยในเรื่องของการบทอ่านที่เป็นโต้แย้งทำให้สมรรถนะบางอย่างในเรื่องของการประเมินและสะท้อนไม่ได้ฝึกอย่างต่อเนื่องอย่างเงี้ยเป็นบริบทของเราที่เราได้เรียนรู้แล้วเราก็กำลังจะต้องพัฒนาไปได้ซึ่งระดับของการประเมินlarge scaleที่เป็นพวกสังคมอารมณ์ก็เหมือนกันคิดว่าบทเรียนในวันนี้มีประโยชน์มากๆแต่เราก็ต้องนำมาพิจารณาอีกว่ามันมีอะไรในบริบทของเราที่เราจะต้องเติมเต็มนะคะอันนี้แค่นี้ก่อนเนาะค่ะ
ขออนุญาตถามต่อได้ไหมคะก็คืออย่างเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยพูดถึงอย่างเรื่องการอ่านเนี่ยก็คือพอเราได้ข้อมูลมาเนาะในเรื่องของการอ่านจากการประเมินระดับชาตินานาชาติหรือว่าระดับที่เล็กกว่านั้นก็ตามมันมีโครงสร้างอะไรที่ช่วยให้เชื่อมโยงจากข้อมูลไปสู่การเปลี่ยนแปลงการสอนได้บ้าง
ต้องพูดถึงระบบการศึกษาของเราว่าเรามีตัวกลางเชื่อมระหว่างนโยบายกับห้องเรียนนั่นก็คือศึกษานิเทศนะคะสิ่งที่เราทำความเข้าใจกับศึกษานิเทศก็คือว่าทำอย่างไรเด็กจะได้มีประสบการณ์ในการอ่านที่หลากหลายมากขึ้นนะคะลักษณะของบทอ่านแบบไหนบ้างที่เราควรสนับสนุนให้เกิดขึ้นในห้องเรียนให้มากขึ้นในระดับชั้นของเด็กประถมควรเจอบทอ่านแบบไหนมัธยมต้นควรเจอบทอ่านแบบไหนมัธยมปลายควรเจอบทอ่านแบบไหนซึ่งในระหว่างนี้การเปลี่ยนแปลงเนี่ยมันเป็นการทำให้คุณครูต้องเห็นได้ว่าบทอ่านไม่ได้หมายความว่าอยู่ในเฉพาะวิชาภาษาไทยนะแต่หมายถึงในทุกๆวิชาที่คุณครูทุกกลุ่มสาระวิชาเนี่ยควรร่วมมือกันในการให้เด็กมีประสบการณ์กับบทอ่านที่หลากหลายโดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งบทอ่านที่เป็นเชิงโต้แย้งอันนี้ค่ะก็อาจจะอยู่ในช่วงของการหาบทอ่านต้องยอมรับว่าบทอ่านประเภทนี้คุณครูต้องใช้ฝีไม้ลายมือหรือเวลาในการค้นหานะคะแล้วตัวของส่วนกลางเองโดยเฉพาะสถาบันภาษาไทยสำนักวิชาการเนี่ยก็ได้มีวิธีการหรือว่าเป็นคู่มือแนวทางในการให้คุณครูในทุกๆกลุ่มสาระเนี่ยพยายามที่จะใช้บทอ่านต่างๆเหล่านั้นกับนักเรียนให้ได้มากขึ้นแล้วก็คิดว่ามันคงไม่ได้เห็นผลภายในปี2ปีข้างหน้านะคะแต่ว่าอาจจะอยู่ในช่วงอีกแบบเซอร์เคิลหนึ่งของพิซซ่าเราก็มาดูกันว่าจากแนวทางของการพัฒนาในระดับนโยบายมันจะมีผลต่อคะแนนของพิซซ่าเพิ่มขึ้นมากน้อยแค่ไหนค่ะ
ขอบคุณค่ะคือสิ่งที่ดร.ณัฐฐาพูดถึงเนี่ยแต่ในประเด็นที่ใน3วันนี้เห็นเป็นธีมอยู่เหมือนกันก็คือการพูดถึงเรื่องความเชื่อมโยงหรือ linkage ใช่ไหมมีทั้งเรื่องของการเชื่อมโยงระหว่าง data กับการเรียนการสอนหรือว่า data ในส่วนต่างๆในเรื่องของทั้ง cognitive แล้วก็ความปลอดภัยอย่างนี้เกิดขึ้นแล้วก็อาจจะมีในเรื่องอย่างเมื่อสักครู่อาจารย์ทาง อาจารย์อีกท่านนะคะอาจารย์มหาวิทยาลัยซึ่งเมื่อสักครู่นั่งอยู่ในผู้ชมด้วยตอนนี้ท่านติดภารกิจท่านก็ฝากคำถามหรือคอมเมนต์ไว้เหมือนกันว่าถ้าอย่างนั้นเนี่ยความเชื่อมโยงของการวัดและประเมินหลายๆอย่างที่เราได้ฟังมาทั้ง3วันเนี่ยมันมีความเป็นไปคือเวลาเอาไปใช้เนี่ยจะเชื่อมโยงข้อมูลยังไงเช่นเรามีข้อมูลในวัยการประเมินทดสอบอย่างหนึ่งเนี่ยเป็นเด็กเล็กจะเป็น EF พอเด็กโตขึ้นมาหน่อยเรากลายเป็นว่าเรามี social emotional learning ถ้าอย่างนั้นสองตัวนี้ความเชื่อมโยงหรือเวลาเอาไปใช้เชื่อมโยงกันได้แค่ไหนแล้วก็อีกส่วนหนึ่งที่ฝากไว้เป็นคำถามเหมือนกันนะคะซึ่งถ้ามีเวลาท่านอาจจะอยากอภิปรายเหมือนกันก็คือถ้าอย่างนั้นการใช้ประโยชน์ของการประเมินในระดับlarge scale กับการประเมินในระดับที่เล็กลงไม่ว่าจะเป็นในระดับชั้นเรียนหรือว่ายังไงหรือระดับตัวรายบุคคลเนี่ยเราใช้ประโยชน์ต่างกันยังไงแล้วก็เชื่อมโยงกันได้ยังไงนะคะขอบคุณค่ะแล้วก็ถ้าอย่างนั้นเดี๋ยวขอข้ามไปที่ panelist ท่านที่3ได้ไหมคะคุณครูกิติกรค่ะท่านมีความเห็นยังไงบ้าง
สวัสดีครับผมเป็นคล้ายๆกับเป็นตัวแทนในเชิงปฏิบัติแล้วกันนะครับเพราะว่าเป็นคนที่ค่อนข้างใกล้ชิดกับนักเรียนมากคือเป็นครูสอนนักเรียนระดับชั้นม.ปลายครับที่ผมก็ลองนั่งดูทั้งหมด3วันครับแทบจะนั่งดูทั้งหมด 100% เลยครับอาจจะมีแบบออกไปเข้าห้องน้ำบ้างอะไรบ้างครับก็ส่วนใหญ่คือพอเวลาเรามองภาพรวมครับคืออันนี้เป็นนวัตกรรมการประเมินผลการเรียนรู้ครับซึ่งเราจะเห็นว่าคือนักวิจัยแล้วก็นักวิชาการที่เกี่ยวข้องกับการศึกษาครับที่มาพูดในทั้งหมด3วันเนี่ยครับคือจะมีทุกคนพูดภาพรวมโดยรวมทั้งหมดเลยครับโดยไม่ใช่แค่พูดถึงเรื่องของการวัดที่เป็น knowledge อย่างเดียวที่เป็นความรู้อย่างเดียวครับก็เหมือนที่ท่านคุณหมอวิจารณ์พูดไว้เมื่อวันแรกครับคือเราไม่ได้วัดแค่ KSA ครับคือเราควรจะมีตัว V ที่เป็น value มาด้วยทีนี้ไม่ใช่มีแค่ V value อย่างเดียวครับก็ต้องแบบวัดเด็กในเชิงของ formative assessment แล้วก็ตัวของ constructive feedback ครับก็คือให้กระบวนการตอบกลับของเขาไปด้วยครับคือในช่วงที่เขาเรียนกับเราอยู่เนี่ยเขาควรจะรู้ตัวเองว่าเขาควรจะปรับตัวยังไงบ้างไม่ใช่ถึงว่าท้ายปีแล้วเนี่ยถึงจะมารู้ว่าตัวเองอ่อนวิชาอะไรอย่างเงี้ยครับซึ่งมันเป็นช่องว่างอยู่ที่ผมก็ยังนึกไม่ออกนะครับว่าคือรากฐานของการศึกษาครับในตัวของครูแล้วก็ในตัวของเด็กในตัวของผู้ปกครองศึกษานิเทศผอ.เนี่ยคือมันโยงใยเชื่อมโยงกันไปหมดจนไม่รู้ว่าจะต้องแก้อันไหนก่อนครับคือเราไม่รู้คือตอนนี้เราไม่ได้หาคำตอบครับว่าเราจะแก้ยังไงเราต้องหาปัญหาก่อนครับว่าปัญหาเราเนี่ยอยู่ตรงไหนเป็นอันดับแรกครับทีนี้ผมก็เลยลองมาดูว่าตัวของหลักสูตรฐานสมรรถนะครับที่พวกเรากำลังพยายามผลักดันเนี่ยให้มันถูกใช้สักทีเนี่ยที่เราทำการวิจัยมาในพื้นที่นวัตกรรมหลายๆจังหวัดนะครับมันค่อนข้างเป็นรูปเป็นร่างพร้อมที่จะโดนใช้แล้วครับคือมันอาจจะต้องมีการปรับเปลี่ยนเนี่ยมันจะกระทบหลายๆในเชิงทั้งรัฐบาลเชิงทั้งเอกชนครับคือเปลี่ยนทั้งระบบการรับนักศึกษาครูเข้ามาเปลี่ยนทั้งอาจารย์ที่จะต้องสอนแบบใหม่ทั้งหมดครับคือมันกระทบทั้งหมดก็จริงแต่ว่ามันก็น่าลองเสี่ยงนะครับยิ่งเราเริ่มเร็วเท่าไหร่เราก็จะรู้ว่าเราต้องผิดพลาดต้องปรับปรุงอะไรไปบ้างในอนาคตนะครับทีนี้เรื่องของหลักสูตรฐานสมรรถนะที่อาจจะมีการใช้ในวันข้างหน้าครับผมลองนึกดูว่าถ้าเราลองบังคับใช้จริงๆแล้วครับมันก็จะมีหัวข้อที่ทุกท่านในที่นี้ครับได้พูดถึงกันนะอยู่ในตัวแก่นของสมรรถนะนั้นอยู่แล้วครับซึ่งหนึ่งในนั้นก็คือเป็นความรู้ของเราที่เราทำกันอยู่แล้วแต่ทีนี้เรามีหัวข้ออื่นๆอย่างเช่นการที่เป็นพลเมืองโลกการคิดขั้นสูงเนี่ยเพิ่มเข้ามานะครับคือคุณครูที่เขาใหม่มากๆกับหลักสูตรพวกนี้ครับเขาต้องการคนสอนแล้วก็คนต้องการที่คนเทคแคร์มากๆทีนี้การที่เราจะเอาหลักสูตรนี้ไปใช้ครับมันจะต้องกระจายออกจากศูนย์กลางครับเราต้องกระจายให้พื้นที่ทุกพื้นที่ในประเทศไทยเนี่ยครับค่อยๆทำความเข้าใจการสอนเด็กแบบนี้ครับทีนี้ตัวผมเองเนี่ยที่เป็นครูสอนอยู่แล้วครับถ้าผมไม่ได้ออกมาดูข้างนอกเนี่ยว่าคนอื่นเขาสอนอะไรยังไงบ้างมีตัวสมรรถนะไหนบ้างที่ทั้งต่างประเทศแล้วก็ในประเทศเนี่ยกำลังดูอยู่เนี่ยผมก็จะไม่รู้เลยว่าเรามีหัวข้อนี้ที่จะต้องผลักดันเด็กอยู่เราไม่รู้เลยว่าจะต้องมีคำว่า globalization เนี่ยที่จะต้องผลักดันเด็กไปด้วยครับ คือตัวของคนปฏิบัติครับคือเขาไม่รู้ครับว่าเขาต้องทำยังไงครับทีนี้มันก็เลยอย่างลากลึกครับเพราะว่าคนปฏิบัติไม่ได้มีคนเดียวคนที่เกี่ยวข้องไม่ได้มีคนเดียวมีหลายๆคนที่มันผูกกันไปครับทีนี้มันเป็นโจทย์ใหญ่เลยว่าเราต้องไปดูว่าปัญหาของเราคืออะไรครับก่อนที่จะไปหาคำตอบครับผมขอบคุณครับ
อยากเสริมเกี่ยวกับเรื่องการใช้เครื่องมือในโรงเรียนนะครับผมอยากให้ใช้เครื่องมือในโรงเรียนแบบมินิมอลครับคือใช้เมื่อใช้น้อยครั้งแต่มีประสิทธิภาพที่สุดผมคิดว่าน่าจะไปผูกกับคำว่า window of opportunity ของเด็กหมายถึงว่าอย่างเช่น EF ถ้าเราได้ลองรีวิวครับ EF เด็กจะพัฒนาสูงสุดเมื่อประมาณเด็ก6 ขวบเราก็ควรน่าจะลองถอยไปวัดแถว 4-5 ขวบเพื่อไม่ให้เด็กเสียหายถ้าเราไปวัด7 ขวบบางอย่างอาจจะเลยเวลาในการพัฒนาไปแล้วรวมถึงตัวอื่นๆด้วยอย่างโรงเรียนผมก็สนใจเรื่องการพัฒนา EF พัฒนา SEL พัฒนา well-being รวมถึงพัฒนาตัว competency ซึ่งสิ่งที่ผมยังสงสัยและยังอยากรู้นอกเหนือจาก EF ที่มี window of opportunity ที่6 ขวบครับตัวอื่นๆเองผมก็สงสัยว่าเราน่าจะใช้เครื่องมือวัดในวัยไหนถึงจะเหมาะสมแล้วจะได้ช่วยเหลือเด็กได้ทันเวลาเพื่อไม่ให้เด็กเขาสูญเสียโอกาสในการเรียนรู้ในระยะยาวตรงนี้ผมว่าสำคัญมากที่คิดว่าถ้าวันนี้นักวิจัยเก่งๆหลายท่านมาก็อยากจะฝากประเด็นนี้ไว้ครับคือวัดเมื่อไหร่วัดตอนไหนไม่ต้องมากครั้งแต่ได้ประสิทธิภาพสูงสุดแล้วก็ฟีดแบ็กให้ครูให้โรงเรียนได้ใช้พัฒนาเด็กของตัวเองได้อย่างสูงสุดฮะตรงนี้ที่อยากจะเติมและอยากจะนำมาใช้ให้เหมาะกับโรงเรียนครับ
อันนี้ขออนุญาตถามต่อนะคะก็คือโรงเรียนเนี่ยมีการตัดสินใจระดับหนึ่งว่าเราจะใช้การวัดและประเมินอันไหนถึงจะมี Impact สูงที่สุดแล้วก็ไม่ได้ไปรบกวนการเรียนการสอนโดยปกติของเด็กมากนักแต่ว่าก็อยากจะให้มีความพยายามในระดับที่ใหญ่กว่านั้นหรือในระดับนโยบายเพื่อที่จะช่วยชี้นำทางนี้ด้วยเข้าใจถูกไหมคะ
ไม่ต้องถึงกับนโยบายครับผมว่านโยบายถ้ามีจะช่วยเสริมโรงเรียนครับแต่ในขณะที่โรงเรียนก็ขยับได้แบบเล็กๆหมายความว่าไม่ต้องใช้แบ่งเอาตัวที่สำคัญมาใช้ไม่ต้องมากไอเทมครับอย่างเช่น EF มีอะไรบ้างล่ะที่สำคัญแต่ว่าสิ่งที่ผมคอนเซิร์นคือวัดที่วัยไหนจึงจะทำไม่ให้เด็กเสียโอกาสแล้วไม่ต้องวัดทุกปีวัดในช่วงวัยที่สำคัญที่ท่วงทีต่อการที่เราจะฟีดแบ็กเพื่อพัฒนาเด็กอาจจะไม่ต้องวัดทุกคนถ้าเรามีวิธีสุ่มตัวอย่างที่เราจะพัฒนาเชิงระบบได้ครับ
ได้ค่ะขอบคุณมากนะคะสำหรับ panelist ในรอบแรกของคอมเมนต์ในช่วงนี้นะคะเดี๋ยวขออนุญาตดูคำถามในสไลด์โดก่อนแล้วก็ระหว่างนี้นะคะสปีกเกอร์ถ้าท่านอยากจะคอมเมนต์หรือว่าโดนพาดใช้สิทธิ์ที่โดนพาดพิงนะคะท่านสามารถอาจจะช่วยแก้ไขหรือว่าช่วยแนะนำเพิ่มเติมได้นะคะช่วงนี้มีคำถามในสไลด์โดนะคะเบื้องต้นที่เห็นก็จะมีคอมเมนต์เกี่ยวกับว่าถ้านักเรียนไม่มีความสุขเนี่ยฉะนั้นการโดยเฉพาะในช่วงที่สอบเข้าขั้นระดับสูงอย่างมหาวิทยาลัยเนี่ยจะมีคำถามนะคะก็คือว่าจะมีแนวทางแก้ไขยังไงได้บ้างน่าจะเป็นลดการแข่งขันการเข้ามหาวิทยาลัยถ้าให้ตีความก็คืออาจจะเป็นเรื่องของเนื้อหาแล้ว2อาจจะเป็นเรื่องของความเครียดแล้วก็ well-being ไม่ทราบว่ามีท่านไหนอยากจะตอบอันตรงนี้ไหมคะมีแนวทางเชิญค่ะ
ค่ะก็จากความเครียดของการสอบเข้ามหาวิทยาลัยเนี่ยต้องยอมรับว่ามันเป็นสิ่งหนึ่งที่สร้างความเครียดแน่ๆเนาะมันไม่เครียดก็คงจะเป็นไปได้ยากนะคะแต่ถ้าจะลดความเครียดอย่างหนึ่งในตอนนี้ก็คือว่าตัวผู้เรียนควรที่จะรู้จักตัวเองจริงๆก่อนว่าตัวเขาเองอยากจะเรียนอะไรทีนี้เวลาที่เราได้เจอเป้าหมายของการเรียนเนี่ยเวลาที่เราแข่งขันมันจะเครียดแหละแต่มันอาจจะเป็นความเครียดที่เราพร้อมแล้วเรารู้จักตัวเองจริงๆเนาะแล้วก็มีบางอย่างที่พร้อมที่จะเข้าสู่สนามแข่งขันความเครียดมันก็จะลดลงแต่ถ้าเด็กไม่รู้ว่าสิ่งที่เราจะไปแข่งขันเรามีอะไรมันก็จะเพิ่มความเครียดดังนั้นสิ่งที่ครูทำได้ก็คือพยายามให้เด็กของเราเนี่ยรู้จักความเป็นตัวตนของตัวเองให้เร็วเท่าที่จะทำได้แล้วก็เก็บสะสมประสบการณ์จนกระทั่งถึงวันที่เขาจะต้องแข่งขันมันจะลดความเครียดลงไปได้เยอะเลยอะค่ะ
อันนี้เข้าใจว่าใกล้เคียงกับที่คุณพอลคอมเมนต์ก่อนหน้านี้เนาะ Paul you mentioned earlier about maybe raising a little bit of the challenge and perhaps stress level in learning would you like to comment on that
I enjoyed the to and fro we had about that. I was being provocative, obviously, on stress. And I think the very word, to me, as an educationalist who spent most of my time in Europe, the stress a child feels is completely different from the stress a child is feeling in a school in South Africa at the moment. And therefore, when you use the word stress, different images come to the mind. But it did make me think that perhaps we ought to try and deconstruct the word a bit more, because I think there's good stress and there's bad stress. I think stress is a natural, it's almost like a hormone. You know, it's what makes us get out of bed in the morning. If we didn't have a certain amount of stress, we'd still be lying there now. So that there is part of the human metabolism which is designed to make you anxious in order you do things. But there are levels of stress which are completely counterproductive to learning. And it's very noticeable that high levels of stress seem to undermine learning. But then, you know, we've just heard from Esther, she's recording incredibly high levels of stress amongst incredibly high-achieving pupils in exam terms and so forth. And you go, we need to unpick this a bit to kind of understand what's going on and what is helpful to learning and achievement and what is not.
Thank you คุณพอนะคะก็คอมเมนต์สั้นๆว่าเมื่อสักครู่เราพูดถึงเรื่องของความเครียดแล้วก็น่าจะมีการอาจจะต้องมีการจำแนกระดับของความเครียดอีกเพราะว่าอาจจะมีในเรื่องของความเครียดของแต่ละคนเวลาเราพูดเนี่ยบริบทมันแตกต่างกันมีทั้งความเครียดจากความขาดแคลนเนาะแล้วก็ความเครียดจากการเรียนหรือว่าในจากการสอบดังที่พูดถึงแล้วก็ก่อนหน้านี้เราก็พูดถึงคือความเครียดเนี่ยบางทีมันก็ไปแตะในเรื่องของ well-being ซึ่งก็มีการเราคุยกันเรื่องของการวัดและประเมินหลายอย่างเหมือนกันอาจจะแต่ว่าถ้าในบริบทของนักเรียนที่สอบเข้าเนี่ยเข้าใจว่ายังไม่เคยมีการวัดเท่าไหร่ส่วนมากเป็น anecdotal evidence ใช่ไหมคะว่ามีเรื่องของระดับความเครียดที่เพิ่มขึ้นแล้วมันก็เป็นเราก็ไม่รู้ว่ามันชั่วคราวหรือว่ามันอยู่นานแค่ไหนเหมือนกันซึ่งตรงนี้ถ้ามีนักวิจัยที่มีข้อมูลเนี่ยก็อาจจะช่วยในเรื่องของการเยียวยาแล้วก็การป้องกันต่อไปอีกทีหนึ่งค่ะ Thank you for your comment คำถามอื่นนะคะในสไลโดนะคะตอนนี้มีน่าจะเป็นคอมเมนต์ก็จะเป็นเรื่องของ integrative skills ที่เป็น problem based อันนี้เข้าใจว่าหมายถึง presentation ของเมื่อวานนะคะที่เป็น problem based assessment เนี่ยน่าจะเป็นสื่อการสอนและเป็น formative ความเข้าใจก็คือว่าเป็นคอมเมนต์ที่เกี่ยวกับว่าของเมื่อวานเนี่ยมีการประเมินที่เป็น task ซึ่งจะ combine สกิลหลายอย่างด้วยกันสกิลพวกที่เราเรียกว่า 4C หรือว่า 21st century skills เนี่ยค่ะเมื่อวานแล้วก็น่าจะมีไอเดียที่เหมือนกับว่าน่าจะมีการใช้ประโยชน์นอกเหนือจากในด้านของการวัดและประเมินเนี่ยน่าจะส่งต่อไปถึงคุณครูแล้วก็ในการเรื่องของการจัดการเรียนการสอนได้ด้วยนะคะแล้วก็มีอีกท่านหนึ่งนะคะ so my other colleague ก็มีท่านหนึ่งที่ฝากคอมเมนต์ไว้เช่นกันนะคะแล้วก็ perhaps some of you may want to comment on this as well so my colleague from OEC Office of Education Council unfortunately could not join this session but they left a comment questions a comment as well and they saidคอมเมนต์นะคะก็คือว่าใน3วันที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยหลายครั้งเวลาเราดูข้อมูลดู Data เนี่ยจะเห็นการจำแนกตาม geographical คือตามพื้นที่ตามจังหวัดหรือว่าตามมลรัฐการปกครองนะคะทีนี้ก็มีข้อเสนอว่าแต่ว่าเวลาเรานำข้อมูลไปใช้ประโยชน์เนี่ยบางครั้งเราต้องการจำแนกตามประเภทหรือว่าความต้องการของนักเรียนเช่นนักเรียนที่มีความบกพร่องหรือว่ามีความพิการ disability บางอย่างหรือว่านักเรียนที่มีความขาดแคลนบางอย่างเช่นมีความยากจน living with poverty อย่างนี้เป็นต้นก็ไม่แน่ใจว่าถ้ามีการจำแนกข้อมูลในลักษณะนั้นน่าจะมีการช่วยเป็นประโยชน์ไหมเอ่ย so would any of you would like to comment or add on to that ดร.ณฐาอยากจะเพิ่มเติมไหมคะ
อันนี้เป็นประเด็นเดียวกันกับที่เราได้มาคุยกันเรื่องเกี่ยวกับบทอ่านเหมือนกันนะคือเรื่องนี้เป็นตัวอย่างหนึ่งที่เราพบว่าจริงๆแล้วการไม่มีประสบการณ์ในการอ่านมันมีด้วยกันหลายสาเหตุจากความขาดแคลนหนังสือเนี่ยก็เป็นสิ่งหนึ่งที่เกิดขึ้นได้เนาะแปลว่าเวลาที่เราอ่านงานวิจัยแล้วเราก็มีการสื่อสารในฝั่งนโยบายว่าเราอยากให้โรงเรียนเนี่ยเพิ่มบทอ่านที่มีความหลากหลายบทอ่านที่มีข้อโต้แย้งเพิ่มมากขึ้นในระดับปฏิบัติในห้องเรียนเราต้องมานั่งวิเคราะห์นักเรียนของเราอีกว่าที่เขาไม่ได้อ่านเพราะอะไรซึ่งแต่ละโรงเรียนเนี่ยคิดว่ามีสาเหตุที่ต่างกันบางโรงเรียนที่อาจจะมีความพร้อมสูงเพียงแต่ว่าอาจจะไม่ได้คำนึงถึงไม่ได้ตระหนักแล้วก็ยังไม่ได้ค้นหาบทอ่านแต่กับโรงเรียนที่มีความขาดแคลนหรือนักเรียนที่อาจจะมีโอกาสในการเข้าถึงการอ่านไม่ได้มากพออันนี้ก็เป็นปัจจัยที่งานวิจัยที่เราอ่านเหมือนกันแต่เราต้องมากลับมาย้อนมองในภาพของโรงเรียนเราซึ่งไอ้ตรงนี้แหละมันเป็นหน้าที่ของบริบทของโรงเรียนที่จะวิเคราะห์หาสาเหตุเชิงลึกเข้าไปของเด็กแต่ละคนอีกแล้วเราก็ต้องพยายามเหมือนกับทำให้มันฟิตกับตัวปัญหาของเด็กของเราด้วยเพราะว่าในระดับภาพใหญ่เราอาจจะแต่ก็เป็นไอเดียตรงที่ว่าเราไม่ได้มองความแตกต่างมากขนาดนั้นเราให้แค่ข้อเสนอแนะที่เป็นบริบทกว้างๆก็เป็นความคิดหรือเป็นแกลบหนึ่งที่เราอาจจะต้องค้นหาปัจจัยสาเหตุที่ลึกลงไปถึงความแตกต่างลงไปอีกเพราะแน่นอนว่าคุณครูแต่ละคนก็อาจจะไม่ได้มีเวลามานั่งวิเคราะห์มากมายนักส่วนกลางก็คงจะต้องช่วยหรือว่ามีข้อมูลที่มากพอย่อยให้กับคุณครูมากขึ้นกว่าเดิมเนาะค่ะ
ค่ะแล้วก็ต่อเนื่องจากคอมเมนต์เมื่อสักครู่นะคะก็คือเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยคอมเมนต์แตะไปถึงในเรื่องของการนำข้อมูลไปใช้เพื่อปรับปรุงการเรียนการสอนหรือว่าปรับปรุงการบริหารสถานศึกษาด้วยถูกไหมคะแล้วก็จริงๆคอมเมนต์ที่ทางสภาการศึกษาท่านฝากไว้เนี่ยก็ครอบคลุมไปถึงว่าถ้าอย่างนั้นเวลาแซมปลิ้งเด็กนักเรียนเนี่ยจำเป็นจะต้องมีกลุ่มหนึ่งที่ represent กลุ่มที่มีความบกพร่องหรือว่ามีความยากจนเป็นพิเศษอย่างนี้ไหมเชิญค่ะ
งั้นเพิ่มเติมเนาะจากการที่เรานั่งฟังจริงๆนั่งฟังแบบ Facebook Live นะคะไม่ได้แบบออนไซต์เนาะสิ่งหนึ่งที่เราอยากได้ก็คือว่าตอนนี้ Computer Based Assessment มันมีแบบมันอำนวยความสะดวกในการที่เราจะหาสาเหตุเชิงปัจจัยได้ง่ายขึ้นที่ไม่ต้องแบบไป Paper Based อะไรอย่างเงี้ยแล้วปกติเวลาเราสอบพิซซ่าเนี่ยพิซซ่าจะมี questionnaire เนาะแล้วก็เป็นข้อมูลในเชิงปัจจัยอันนี้เป็นสิ่งหนึ่งที่เราคิดอยากจะทำซึ่ง questionnaire ที่เราจะเพิ่มเติมมาทำคู่กับ testing เนี่ยมันอาจจะสามารถแบ่งกลุ่ม sampling แล้วก็หาบริบทอะไรบางอย่างของเด็กแต่ละคนที่ทำไมเขาไม่มีประสบการณ์ในการอ่านซึ่งคำตอบของครูนักเรียนหรือผู้ปกครองเนี่ยอาจจะได้อะไรบางอย่างที่ทำให้เราเห็น grouping ที่เกิดขึ้นของความแตกต่างกันแล้วเราก็จะได้ในระดับนโยบายเองเราก็จะได้สื่อสารกับโรงเรียนให้ชัดเจนมากขึ้นว่าคุณลองประเมินตัวเองซิคุณอยู่กลุ่มไหนสาเหตุมันเป็นแบบนี้คุณจะพัฒนาเขาได้อย่างไรแต่ตอนนี้ภาพของเราคือเป็นภาพของการให้ข้อมูลในเชิงของปัญหาแบบกว้างเกินไปอาจจะไม่ได้ลงแยกกลุ่มย่อยเกินไปแบบสอบถามผ่านพวกออนไลน์เทสติ้งต่างๆเหล่านี้น่าจะทำให้การหาข้อมูลแบบนี้สำหรับส่วนกลางที่เป็น large scale assessment เนี่ยทำได้ง่ายขึ้นนะคะ
ก็คือนำข้อมูลที่ได้จากการประเมินเนี่ยไปสร้างโปรไฟล์ของนักเรียน
ใช่เพราะว่าแบบ
หรือจากคอนเท็กซ์ต่างๆมาช่วย
พอเป็น
ในการสร้าง
paper base เนี่ยมันก็จะมีความรู้สึกแบบฉันบอก
we had a wonderful conceptualization of reading skills from you, which highlighted the skills which are being assessed. Right? And I said I was really interested in the relationship between that and Bloom's taxonomy, because you could see very clearly that there was a ladder up which thinking should go to demonstrate your reading ability. And first of all, to remember, can you remember what happened at the beginning of the story? Understand, what can you show to understand? And then to analyze what happens, and then to evaluate what happens. Now, those thinking processes are stimulated by the teacher, by the questions they ask when they are doing stories. So even in a kindergarten class, you can be reading a story and then go, what do you think happens next? And they go, oh, that, why do you think that? Where have you got that information from? And what makes you think that? And so forth. And then you read a little bit more. And you go, do you think the wolf or Little Red Riding Hood has a better moral character? That's evaluation and so forth. You can have these conversations in class. And then when you actually start dealing with the text, that's how you're doing it. Now, my observation, because this is very central practice to mother tongue-based multilingual education, is to stimulate these high-level thinking skills, is that that's not happening enough in Thai schools. And therefore, when they're presented in a test to demonstrate that they're able to do that, well, they've never done it, if you see what I mean. If it was normal to the class discourse, then they'd sail through the reading tests.
So I told everybody yesterday already that we have teacher material also that you can use. So exactly what you were telling now. So what are the processes? What is the didactics that you can use? We have passages that you can use. They're all freely accessible. You can just download them from the website. They're all free. So they can be used in classes. But I do agree with you that you need to use whatever materials there are to teach the different processes and the different ways you can teach those to your students, and the different ways you can, have them engaged in passages also and have them engaged in reading. I think that's really important.
We've done a lot of work in Ireland, and Ireland scores incredibly highly on reading. It's fourth in the world on the PISA tests and so forth. It's deeply cultural in Ireland that adults talk to children all the time about the most complex things. And if you're sitting at the dinner table, you know, at the age of 4, you're expected to be a participant in those conversations. And I think Esther actually was referring to this in some of, somebody this afternoon was saying, talk to your children, and it's the quality of that conversation will push up the thinking skills. And I think the training of the parents is to help them understand, that's a very boring question. Ask a complicated question, get them used to dealing with complexity.
My answer is very simple. In my analysis of the reading performance of Hong Kong, actually the enjoyment of reading have the strongest prediction. Enjoyment. So it's not about skills, I'm sorry. It's really the number of books surround her, and then make reading as a kind of habit, and then they just love it. And then that's it. It's a very simple way. Like I'm reading my own stuff when my 2 girls reading their own, but they have their own bookshelf, and then they can pick up whatever books they like, Chinese, English, and then they never have private tutors because they have the kind of self-regulated learning very early in grade 2, and then this reading skill read beyond just the language. It's about different kind of subject and thinking. So the simplest way is the most cost-effective way, because I don't have much time as a mother. So I really love to buy books for the girls and for myself, and then make the reading very accessible in the school, very tiny little bookshelf in the campus. That is very cost-effective. No need for much time for the teachers, but you can raise some reading mom, reading dad to come to the campus to share the reading, and then usually the middle-class parents will have time to do it. But the most benefit one are the poor children. That is from my paper of Ho and Wims, that more volunteer in school reduce this achievement gap for the high SES and low SES students. I published in 1996, and then it's still very popular. You can chase it.
But Esther, lots of children don't love reading.
That's why
What, the volunteer is going to inject love of reading into the child? The volunteer is going to inject love of reading into the child.
Not inject. You just, actually, like recently, in the beginning of a school day, reading mom and reading dad, we just spend the first 20 minutes, and then they start with a very interesting book, and then the kids can borrow those books back home. And then this reading mom and dad is kind of adopt a model for them. So for the poor mother, they really don't have, they are so exhausted with their work. They don't have time to read to their kids. But once you start, you have to believe the kids. They love to learn. Every kids are very curious. They love to learn and they can read properly. That's the way I think is very, very important. But I have to say, this is a kind of very middle class thinking. So if you are serving those very poor, disadvantaged school, you have to raise some parent volunteers that they are capable to do it. But regardless of the background, every kid loves to read if you provide the sufficient condition. And the physical form of reading is very important, not the e-version. I don't know.
Okay, I'd love to come back to our discussion on reading in a bit. ตอนนี้นะคะเข้าใจว่ามีคำถามที่มีท่านที่ถามมาอยู่รออยู่ในซูมนะคะเดี๋ยวเราคงจะได้ยินคำถามของคุณสิริยากรนะคะอยู่ในซูมเดี๋ยวลองดูว่าเราจะช่วยกันอภิปรายในด้านนี้ยังไงคุณสิริยากรถ้าพร้อมแล้วเชิญเลยค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะได้ยินเสียงนะคะ
ได้ยินค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะท่านวิทยากรทุกท่านแล้วก็คณะผู้จัดทางของกสศนะคะดิฉันสิริยากรกองทองค่ะก็ได้ไปเขียนเอาไว้ในช่องแชทนะคะว่าสะท้อนเรื่องเกี่ยวกับแนวคิดของการเสวนาใน3วันนี้จริงๆก็ชอบใจของจากที่ท่านอาจารย์วิจารณ์ได้พูดเอาไว้นะคะเรื่องเกี่ยวกับการพัฒนาในเชิงของสรุปผลกับการพัฒนาเพื่อการพัฒนาซึ่งจริงๆแล้วในประเทศไทยเราทุกวันนี้เท่าจากที่ดิฉันเห็นในเชิงสาธารณะเนาะก็จะเป็นเหมือนพยายามจะสรุปผลหรือชี้ประเด็นให้เห็นว่าเด็กโรงเรียนนี้ได้ไปต่อโรงเรียนนั้นเด็กโรงเรียนนี้ได้เข้าไปที่นู่นที่นี่อะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะแต่ในขณะความเป็นจริงแล้วในประเทศไทยเราจะเห็นว่าเด็กวัยรุ่นของเรามีทักษะทางอารมณ์ค่อนข้างจะน่ากลัวใจเด็กจะเหมือนอายุยิ่งต่ำลงจะพบปัญหาเกิดขึ้นตรงเนี้ยอยากจะให้ทางโรงเรียนเนี่ยต้องปรับ mindset เรื่องของการที่ว่าเน้นเรื่องเกี่ยวกับคะแนนสูงหรือความสำเร็จอย่างเดียวอะค่ะเพราะว่าตรงนั้นเนี่ยพูดตรงๆว่าเด็กที่ไปได้ดีเนี่ยส่วนหนึ่งก็มาจากผู้ปกครองที่ให้การสนับสนุนด้วยแต่กลุ่มเหล่านี้ไม่ใช่เสียงส่วนใหญ่ของประเทศไทยเพราะฉะนั้นอยากให้ดูกลุ่มเด็กที่เป็นเด็กส่วนใหญ่ของประเทศไทยเรามากกว่าว่าเกิดอะไรขึ้นทำไมทักษะทางอารมณ์ของเขาดูแบบว่าไม่อยากจะพูดว่าน่ากลัวนะคะแต่ว่ามันก็จะไปในทิศทางนั้นถ้าเราดูจากข่าวอย่างเงี้ยค่ะการตบตีกันหรือการพูดอะไรไม่ถูกใจกันก็มีการลงไม้ลงมือกันแล้วในขณะเดียวกันเนี่ยเรื่องเกี่ยวกับการศึกษาปฐมวัยก็จะเห็นว่าครูปฐมวัยเดี๋ยวนี้เนี่ยมีการเรียนรู้เรื่องเกี่ยวกับการสอนเด็กโดยใช้เป็น active learning หรือการเตรียมความพร้อมหรือการบูรณาการเขาก็พยายามที่จะมีการปรับการเรียนการสอนโดยเน้นรูปแบบนั้นอยู่นะคะทีเนี้ยก็งงอยู่เหมือนกันว่ามันเกิดช่องว่างตรงจุดไหนของระดับจากปฐมวัยไปสู่ประถมและมัธยมเนี่ยทำไมเด็กเยาวชนของเราจึงเกิดปัญหาที่พบเนี่ยต่างๆมากมายในประเด็นนั้นนะอยากให้นักวิชาการผู้รู้ที่ร่วมนั่งกันอยู่ในที่นี้ค่ะเรามาน่าช่วยกันแก้ปัญหาของคนกลุ่มนี้มากกว่าที่จะพยายามเห็นว่าเด็กของเราต้องไปเรียนตรงนั้นไปเข้าตรงนี้อะไรอย่างนี้อันนั้นเป็นว่าไม่ค่อยน่าห่วงเพราะว่าผู้ปกครองก็ซัพพอร์ตยกเว้นว่าเด็กหลายคนอาจจะยังไม่รู้ว่าตัวเองจะไปในทิศทางไหนถูกต้องไหมคะตอนนี้จะพบว่าอย่างเด็กมัธยมเราเนี่ยทั้งที่ก็จะมีชั่วโมงการแนะแนวอยู่นะแต่เขาก็ยังไม่รู้ตนว่าเขาถนัดตรงไหนซึ่งถ้ามาถามตอนมัธยมดิฉันว่าช้าไปค่ะ ก็ขอฝากประเด็นถึงที่มีการพูดถึงตรงนี้นะคะแล้วก็ส่วนเรื่องเนื้อหาการอบรมทั้ง3วันนี้ได้ประโยชน์อย่างมากแล้วก็จะนำไปพัฒนาในงานที่ตัวเองทำอยู่อะค่ะในเรื่องเกี่ยวกับการประเมินเพื่อการพัฒนานะคะว่าจะไปช่วยครูในเรื่องของประกันคุณภาพอย่างไรบ้างค่ะขอบคุณมากค่ะ
ค่ะขอบคุณสำหรับคำถามและคอมเมนต์นะคะก็คือโดยรวมเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยคำถามที่เข้ามาทางซูมก็คือว่าเป็นเรื่องของการตอบสนองต่อความต้องการโดยเฉพาะในเรื่องของทางสังคมอารมณ์ถูกไหมคะโดยเฉพาะในวัยรุ่นหรือว่าจากเรายังไม่มีข้อมูลมากนักในระดับตั้งแต่เด็กประถมวัยจนถึงระดับวัยรุ่นแต่ว่าเราอาจจะมี anecdotal evidence หรือว่ามีข้อมูลจากโครงการที่อยู่ตามโรงเรียนต่างๆเนี่ยเรารู้ว่าเราควรจะพยายามมากกว่านี้ ในการลงทุนให้กับเด็กวัยรุ่นไม่ทราบว่าเมื่อค่ะเชิญค่ะไม่ทราบว่าสักครู่เนี่ยอยากจะถามเหมือนกันว่าทางระดับโรงเรียนหรือว่าสพทเนี่ยมีส่วนไหนที่สามารถช่วยให้ข้อมูลหรือว่าให้ช่วยแก้ปัญหาทางด้านเนี่ยสังคมอารมณ์สำหรับเด็กวัยรุ่นได้บ้าง
ครับผมขอพูดในเชิงของประสบการณ์แล้วกันนะครับคือถ้าเทียบกับระดับชั้นอนุบาลครับของประเทศไทยทีนี้ผมเคยได้มีโอกาสไปเหมือนกับว่าไปเข้าคอนเฟอเรนซ์แล้วก็ฟังแล้วก็ดูวิดีโอแล้วก็ดูพวกเขาเรียกว่าเป็นวิดีทัศน์ครับประมาณชั่วโมง2ชั่วโมงดูว่าประเทศญี่ปุ่นครับเขาสอนเด็กอนุบาลเนี่ยยังไงบ้างไม่ให้เด็กทะเลาะกันครับคือเราเรียกว่า Kids Conference ครับก็คือเขาสอนเด็กครับให้มีการสัมมนาครับในห้องเรียนเนี่ยตั้งแต่ตอนที่เขายังอยู่อนุบาลครับแล้วก็สอนให้เลี้ยงเด็กที่เป็นรุ่นที่เล็กกว่าอย่างเช่นเด็กที่ก่อนเข้าเรียนอนุบาลเนี่ยตั้งแต่ยังเล็กๆเลยนะครับอย่างเช่นสมมติว่ามีเด็ก2คนครับทะเลาะกันอย่างเช่นคุณครูเนี่ยให้เลี้ยงปลาครับที่โรงเรียนนะแล้วมีเด็กคนนึงเนี่ยอยากจะเอาปลากลับบ้านมากนะครับแล้วเพื่อนอีกคนหนึ่งไม่อยากให้เอากลับเนี่ยคือเขาทะเลาะกันครับทีนี้เขาก็จะมีโต๊ะ2ตัวครับมาให้เด็กนั่งคุยกันว่าทำไมถึงอยากจะเอาปลากลับบ้านฉันไม่อยากให้เอากลับเนี่ยแล้วทีนี้เขาคุยกันตั้งแต่เด็กอนุบาลเลยครับคือสิ่งนี้มาโดนปลูกฝังมาในวัฒนธรรมของประเทศญี่ปุ่นซึ่งบรรยากาศแบบนี้คือไม่ค่อยเห็นแบบที่มันเกิดขึ้นในประเทศเราครับคือเขาไม่ได้มีแค่โต๊ะ2ตัวที่ให้เด็กอนุบาลคุยกันครับคือเขายังมีเก้าอี้ที่ล้อมกันเป็นวงกลมเหมือนภาพที่เรามีอยู่ตอนนี้ครับโดยคุณครูเนี่ยเป็นคนนั่งตรงกลางแล้วก็เป็นคนเปิดโจทย์หัวข้อว่าวันนี้เราจะพูดเรื่องอะไรตัวอย่างเช่นพูดว่าหนูเนี่ยเคยเห็นไหมว่าพ่อแม่เราเนี่ยทะเลาะกันยังไงบ้างหรือหัวข้อว่าหนูรู้ไหมว่าเราเนี่ยเกิดขึ้นมาได้ยังไงหรือพูดว่าคือเหตุการณ์อย่างนี้ครับมันเกิดการพูดคุยกันคือสิ่งที่เด็กอนุบาลเขาพูดขึ้นมาครับเราจะไม่เคยคิดเลยว่าเด็กเนี่ยเขาคิดแบบนี้อยู่จนกระทั่งเนี่ยเขามีโอกาสได้พูดออกมาครับแล้วเหตุการณ์อย่างนี้ครับมันวนไปเรื่อยคนที่1คนที่2คนที่3คนที่4จนครบวงครับทีนี้มันมีเหตุการณ์หลายๆอย่างเกิดขึ้นครับที่ผมแบบใช้เวลาประมาณ 2-3 ชั่วโมงเนี่ยนั่งดูแล้วก็ฟังคุณอาจารย์เขาพูดดูเด็กบางคนเนี่ยพูดนานจนเกินไปครับพูดจนที่เพื่อนคนอื่นเนี่ยไม่มีโอกาสได้พูดเลยเพื่อนคนอื่นเนี่ยเขาก็ยกมือขึ้นนะครับว่าเนี่ยนายเนี่ยพูดนานเกินไปแล้วนะเนี่ยฉันไม่มีโอกาสได้พูดเลยครับทีนี้พอคอนเฟอเรนซ์เสร็จปุ๊บนะครับ2คนนี้ทะเลาะกันครับแล้วก็ไปนั่งโต๊ะเพื่อเจรจากันว่าทำไมถึงมาทะเลาะกันอีกครับคือประสบการณ์อย่างเงี้ยครับมันโดนปลูกฝังมาตั้งแต่เด็กครับซึ่งบรรยากาศแบบนี้ครับเราเหมือนมองข้ามกันไปครับจนสุดท้ายแล้วเราไม่ให้ความสัมพันธ์กับมันครับอันนี้คือผมก็อยากแชร์นะครับว่าคือเหตุการณ์ที่เด็กทะเลาะกันเนี่ยมันมีอยู่ทุกโรงเรียนอยู่แล้วครับแต่คือเราจะพยายามจำกัดวงกว้างของมันนะโดยการปลูกฝังเขามาตั้งแต่เด็กครับคือมันเป็นเรื่องของวัฒนธรรมครับแล้วก็จารีตประเพณีของไทยด้วยครับว่าคือเราไม่ค่อยมีอะไรแบบนั้นครับ
ค่ะเชิญค่ะ
ขออนุญาตแชร์คำถามครับจากประสบการณ์นะอันนี้เป็นสมมติฐานที่ไม่ได้มีข้อมูลวิจัยอะไรซัพพอร์ตครับก็จากประสบการณ์คือข้อ1เป็นไปได้ไหมว่าในปลายทางของเด็กเราถูกพูดถึงแต่ผลสอบทางวิชาการเกี่ยวกับเรื่องอารมณ์สังคม well-being อาจจะยังไม่เคยถูกหยิบยกขึ้นมาพูดในโรงเรียนสักเท่าไหร่อันนี้ประเด็นที่1ที่ผมขอตั้งสมมติฐานนะไม่ได้เป็นข้อมูลข้อ2นะครับภาพสะท้อนของเด็กอาจจะเป็นภาพสะท้อนที่มาจากพ่อแม่หรือคุณครูชั้นใดชั้นนั้นคือเด็กที่ไม่มีความสุข อาจจะเป็นไปได้ไหมเกิดจากพ่อแม่หรือครูที่ไม่ค่อยมีความสุขหรือครูหรือพ่อแม่ที่ขาด well-being เช่นเดียวกันครูหรือพ่อแม่ที่ขาดทักษะสังคมอารมณ์อันนี้ตรงไปตรงมานะฮะก็อาจจะทำให้ไม่สามารถบ่มเพาะให้เด็กมีทักษะสังคมอารมณ์ได้อันนี้สมมติฐานที่สองสมมติฐานสุดท้ายก็คือการสังเกตของครูหรือการสังเกตของพ่อแม่เห็นเด็กที่มีปัญหาตั้งแต่เด็กยังเล็กหรือไม่เห็นไหมแล้วก็ถ้าโดยเฉพาะครูถ้าเห็นมีวง PLC ที่คุยกันเพื่อแก้ไขปัญหาสังคมอารมณ์เด็กหรือไม่ตรงเนี้ยมันก็จะย้อนกลับไปข้อหนึ่งเพราะว่าวง PLC อาจจะเป็นไปได้ว่าในวงนั้นนะพูดเรื่อง academic หรือวิชาการเยอะมากไปหรือเปล่าทำนองนี้ครับก็ขออนุญาตเป็นสมมติฐานนะฮะไม่ใช่ข้อมูลที่มีการอ้างอิงใดๆครับขอบคุณครับ
ค่ะเข้าใจว่าคุณครูภูริทัศน์แตะประเด็นสำคัญที่เราถกกันมา3วันนี้หลายเรื่องเลยอย่างที่1ก็คือว่าถ้าเรามีข้อมูลแล้วเราวัดอะไรเราก็จะให้ความสำคัญกับสิ่งนั้นฉะนั้นถ้าช่วงนี้เรามีการวัดในเชิงวิชาการเยอะก็จะมุ่งเน้นไปในประเด็นด้านนั้นเยอะทำให้อาจจะยังไม่ได้ให้ความสำคัญในเรื่องของการพัฒนาทางสังคมอารมณ์มากเท่าที่ควรฉะนั้นไม่แน่ใจว่าถึงตอนนี้ค่ะทางสพท.อยากจะช่วยแนะนำได้ไหมเพราะเมื่อสักครู่แตะเรื่องของโรงเรียนปลอดภัยแล้วว่ามีการขยายผลไปจากโรงเรียนปลอดภัยเนี่ยไปถึง well-being ของคุณครูผู้ปกครองหรือว่ารวมไปถึงการเนี่ยถ้าเราสกรีนคัดกรองแล้วพบว่าเด็กมีระดับความเครียดเนี่ยโรงเรียนสามารถทำอะไรได้บ้าง
ในระดับนโยบายพอพูดถึงโรงเรียนปลอดภัยนะคะเราอาจจะไม่ได้มีงบประมาณมากพอที่จะมีครูแนะแนวทุกโรงเรียนโดยเฉพาะในระดับประถมแต่มัธยมเนี่ยก็มีเยอะอยู่พอสมควรสิ่งที่เราทำได้คือเรามีเหมือนกับนักให้คำปรึกษาประจำเขตพื้นที่ซึ่งดูแลโรงเรียนเป็นกลุ่มๆในกรณีที่คุณครูอาจจะถ้าต้องเริ่มจากคุณครูต้องสังเกตให้ได้ก่อนเนาะถ้าคุณครูสังเกตให้ได้ก่อนแล้วมันเป็นปัญหาที่อาจจะไม่สามารถแก้ได้มันก็อาจจะต้องใช้ผู้เชี่ยวชาญซึ่งในขั้นแรกเนี่ยเขตพื้นที่จะมีผู้ให้คำปรึกษาเป็นด่านหน้าก่อนไปถึงขั้นที่อาจจะเกินกว่าที่ปรึกษาไปอีกเพราะฉะนั้นสิ่งที่เราซัพพอร์ตได้ก็คือผู้ที่ให้คำปรึกษาทางหรือว่าเรียกว่าครูแนะแนวนะคะในระดับที่ให้บริการเป็นกลุ่มโรงเรียนเป็นด่านหน้าก่อนทั้งนี้ทั้งนั้นนะคะอย่างที่บอกว่าเราพยายามเรื่องนี้มันเป็นเรื่องของการที่คุณครูก็จะต้องมีทักษะบางอย่างเกิดขึ้นมากกว่าแค่การพัฒนาวิชาการก็มีการอบรมครูที่อาจจะเป็นคุณครูหนึ่งในโรงเรียนนั้นนะคะที่พอที่จะมีทักษะในการสังเกตพฤติกรรมบางอย่างในเรื่องของอารมณ์สังคมนะคะแต่เหมือนเมื่อสักครู่นี้ไม่แน่ใจว่าคุณครูอาจจะเป็นฝั่งของมัธยมปลายซึ่งมันอาจจะเจอปัญหาบางอย่างที่แบบค่อนข้างเยอะพอสมควรแล้วนะคะแล้วก็สิ่งเหล่านี้อย่างที่อาจารย์บอกเหมือนกันว่าปัญหามันไม่ได้มาสามารถแก้ได้เพียงแค่คนใดคนหนึ่งมันอาจจะต้องใช้วง PLC หรือกว้างไปกว่านั้นนะคะก็ที่เราพยายามให้คำแนะนำก็คือการมีผู้เชี่ยวชาญเป็นการเบื้องต้นช่วยเหลือโรงเรียนที่พบปัญหาในลักษณะนี้ค่ะ
อยากจะเติมอีกนิดนึงครับก็ไหนๆพอเออยู่ตรงนี้แล้วก็คือเป็นคนทำนโยบายและอยู่ส่วนกลางถ้าเป็นไปได้ผมก็อยากจะให้กำลังใจคุณครูครับเพราะว่าผมเชื่อว่าถ้าเรารูทคอสแอนาลิซิสของปัญหาบางทีคุณครูอาจจะไม่ได้มีเวลาในการ PLC ที่ลงลึกถึงเด็กจริงๆก็ได้ถ้าเราไปดู well-being ของคุณครูเผลอๆคุณครูอาจจะใช้เวลากับภาระงานอื่นเยอะไปหมดอันนี้ก็สมมติฐานหนึ่งนะฮะถ้าพอเอช่วยดูได้ก็ผมอยากให้พอเอช่วยจัด well-being ให้คุณครูชุดใหญ่ไฟกระพริบเพื่อให้คุณครูได้มีเวลาในการดูแลเด็กผมเชื่อว่าแล้วปัญหาจะค่อยๆคลี่คลายลงครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะก็อีกส่วนหนึ่งที่อาจจะต่อยอดมาจากทั้งทุกท่านนะคะก็คือว่าในเรื่องของการป้องกันและเยียวยาหลายส่วนที่เราพูดถึงไม่ว่าจะเป็นพัฒนาการทางด้านสังคมอารมณ์หรือทางด้านวิชาการก็ดีเนี่ยจะต้องมีผู้มีส่วนได้ส่วนเสียผู้ส่วนเกี่ยวข้องเนี่ยหลายฝ่ายมากอาจจะไม่ใช่แค่สพท.และกระทรวงศึกษาธิการบางส่วนเนี่ยจะต้องแตะรวมไปถึงหน่วยงานอื่นๆด้วยซึ่งอาจจะรวมทั้งชุมชนเพราะว่าอย่าง presentation ที่เราได้ฟังมาทั้ง3วันเนี่ยก็หลายคนมากที่จะพูดถึงว่าถ้างั้นชุมชนนำข้อมูลจากการประเมินเนี่ยไปใช้ยังไงได้บ้างแล้วก็นอกเหนือจากชุมชนอาจจะมีหน่วยงานที่เกี่ยวข้องกับสาธารณสุขแล้วก็ ฝ่ายปกครองด้วยหลายๆส่วนถูกไหมคะแล้วในด้านการศึกษาเองก็จะยังมีผู้มีส่วนได้ส่วนเสียที่สำคัญก็คือครูผู้บริหารสถานศึกษาซึ่งเราก็เห็นตรงกันนะเนาะว่าควรจะมีสุขภาพทางสุขภาวะทางกายและจิตที่สมบูรณ์พอสมควรถึงจะรับภาระที่หนักหน่วงนี้ได้นะคะแล้วรวมไปถึงผู้ปกครองด้วยเพราะว่าตอนนี้น่าจะหลายท่านคงเห็นตรงกันแล้วล่ะว่าผู้ปกครองมีส่วนสำคัญอย่างยิ่งที่ทำให้เกิดการเรียนรู้จะเอื้อให้เกิดการเรียนรู้มากได้เร็วยิ่งขึ้นหรือว่ามีเรื่องของการชะลอการเรียนรู้เนี่ยผู้ปกครองก็มีส่วนสำคัญในการผลักดันทางด้านนี้เหมือนกันถ้าอย่างนั้นมีคำถามขอเป็นคำถามสุดท้ายละกันนะคะที่เข้ามาในสไลโดของเราตอนนี้มีคอมเมนต์ละกันบอกว่าขอตัวอย่างของการใช้ประโยชน์จากการประเมินผลในระดับโรงเรียนแล้วก็การมีส่วนร่วมของครูผู้ปกครองนักเรียนเป็นอย่างไรบ้างอันนี้ไม่แน่ใจว่าสปีกเกอร์ของเราจะมีข้อมูลไหมเอ่ยเดาว่าsorry to put you on the spot but เดาว่า Pearl มีตัวอย่างบางส่วนของหลังจากได้ข้อมูลไปแล้วเนี่ยโรงเรียนที่มีข้อมูลของระดับ Pearl เนี่ยยังมีส่วนที่เป็นสนิปเปตหรือว่าอย่างอื่นที่เป็นตัวมี case study ที่โรงเรียนสามารถไปใช้ในการปรับปรุงการเรียนการสอนหรือว่าการปรับปรุงการดำเนินงานบางอย่างได้ Would you like to respond Andreas someone else Actually, well, this could address to all the presenters. Actually, the question is, are there any examples of how school can adjust their own practice once they get the data from large-scale assessments? And this could be.
Yeah. So I think
it's working.
Okay, great. So I think like PISA and Pearls and TIMSS, they are mostly for policymakers. So that means that the data first of all goes to the national centers. So the national centers are our partners and they work on a national level with the data. And I think that's also where it should come from. So the international report always is like at a high level, at the national level, about policy implications and things like that. But then you have the national reporting, and that's where you can make the difference for the teachers and for the schools, and there you can interpret the data to help your schools, principals, or your teachers, or parents even, and give them your country results and what is most important for your country and for your schools.
Yeah, just following on from Andrea's presentation yesterday about the material that's available for participating Pearls countries. For instance, the items that are released, and then those are translated, obviously, for the assessment itself, and then become available. The scoring guide. So, as Andrea was explaining yesterday, those can then be downloaded by teachers from the IEA website free of charge, and then taken to schools and used in a classroom. As part of lesson plans as well, and there's the scoring guide and the data available, so then you can also look at the national data and see how your students are faring, also with the international averages as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of material available. Translation is always an issue for sure, but yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, and as well for PISA, I mean, we have also specific large-scale assessment for schools, the PISA for schools, which has been used here. But even beyond that, there is this Global Teaching Insights platform where you can actually share your practices. You can see practices from all over the world. You can watch videos even, see how certain things are implemented in classrooms around the world. There are these rubrics for measuring that was for critical thinking, collaboration, and other 21st century skills developed, and based on that also lesson plans. There is also a report that looks at innovative pedagogies, where there's a collection, a compendium of different pedagogies. So there's a lot of material, but of course we need to ensure that you're aware of these materials. And of course, sometimes there's also the issue that you need to translate it, right? and some of it has been translated, but might not all be available in Thai. But yeah, you can contact us, and often, yeah, you are free to translate the stuff. And for our project, as I mentioned briefly in my presentation, the national centers are also working then out a plan that works in their context to make best use of the data, and we're trying to support them as much as we can. They work, for example, then together with a research institute from their national context to develop like tools that are applicable and that are based on the research and on the report. Yeah, that make the best of impact then in the schools. So there are just a few examples. Yeah.
ค่ะถ้าอย่างนั้นขออนุญาตสรุปนะคะก็คือว่าสำหรับทั้ง Pearls และ Pizza เนี่ยก็มีสื่อหลายอย่างที่ทางโรงเรียนแล้วก็คุณครูเนี่ยสามารถนำไปใช้ประโยชน์ได้ซึ่งนอกเหนือจากตัวข้อมูลจากการวัดประเมินผลก็ยังมีส่วนที่เป็นตัวอย่างคำถามตัวอย่างบทความสำหรับให้เด็กอ่านซึ่งคุณครูน่าจะนำไปใช้ประโยชน์ได้นะคะซึ่งทั้งทาง Pearls แล้วก็ Pizza ก็มีพวกสื่อทรัพยากรเหล่านี้ถ้าอย่างนั้นเดี๋ยวขอเป็นคำถามหรือคอมเมนต์นะคะจากทั้งในห้องที่อยู่ทางนี้แล้วก็ขอทางซูมด้วยแล้วก็คงเป็นคอมเมนต์สุดท้ายสำหรับวันนี้ค่ะไม่ทราบทางซูมมีไหมคะเดี๋ยวเรารอฟังทางซูมสักครู่หนึ่งOkay, I'm gonna need a better better glasses too. So, แต่นะคะมีคำถามนะคะจะเข้ามาจากทางซูมหลายท่านก็ขอบคุณวิทยากรนะคะแล้วก็สปีกเกอร์ทุกท่านมี reflection เข้ามาขออนุญาตอ่านนะคะอันแรกนะคะก็คือว่าเป็นความคิดเห็นของคุณชัยฤกษ์นะคะว่านวัตกรรมการประเมินผลแทบทุกตัวจากหลายประเทศเนี่ยมีที่มามีหลักคิดว่าจะวัดจากอะไรและมีสาเหตุอะไรเช่นวัด socio emotional skill เพราะว่ามีความสัมพันธ์มี correlation กับความสำเร็จในอาชีพซึ่งจะดีมากเลยถ้าเราสามารถนำมาปรับใช้แล้วก็และนำมาปรับใช้ได้แล้วแต่ละตัววัดเนี่ยมีนิยามที่ละเอียดและชัดเจนมากกว่านี้ว่าวัดอย่างไรมากน้อยขึ้นกับอะไรนะคะแล้วก็มีอีก2คอมเมนต์ของชุนชัยฤกษ์เช่นกันก็นวัตกรรมประเมินผลแสดงนวัตกรรมในการประเมินผลแสดงให้เห็นว่าวัดสิ่งที่วัดได้จริงใช้ซ้ำได้แล้วก็แบ่งผลประเมินได้ละเอียดแล้วก็สุดท้ายก็จะเป็นเรื่องของความเชื่อมั่นในเครื่องมือประเมินแล้วก็เรื่องของการนำไปใช้แล้วก็พัฒนานักเรียนจะง่ายมากขึ้นถ้านิยามเนี่ยนิยามของการวัดชัดเจนว่าเราวัดอะไรแล้วก็กลับไปดูที่นิยามแล้วนอกจากนั้นก็มีเพิ่มเติมนะคะเป็นคอมเมนต์เกี่ยวกับจากประสบการณ์ไปของคุณดวงฤทัยจากสพม.พช.ไม่แน่ใจว่าเพชรบูรณ์หรือว่าเพชรบุรีขออภัยค่ะก็คือเป็นจากท่านสน.นะคะจาก District Supervisor ก็คือจากประสบการณ์ไปเยี่ยมโรงเรียนโดยเฉพาะในเรื่องของอันนี้เกี่ยวข้องกับเรื่องของโรงเรียนปลอดภัยก็มักจะเน้น ส่วนมากที่พบจะเป็นเรื่องของการเน้นในเรื่องของความปลอดภัยทางกายภาพแล้วก็แต่ในความปลอดภัยในห้องเรียนที่เป็นเรื่องของความสบายใจเนี่ยยังมีช่องที่เราสามารถจะดำเนินการได้มากอีกเยอะเหมือนกันแล้วก็เห็นหลายท่านก็พยักหน้าโดยเฉพาะในเรื่องของโรงเรียนปลอดภัยนะคะไม่แน่ใจว่ามีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมคะจากท่านที่อยู่ในห้องประชุมนี้ Any other comments? Anyone from the back? Would you like to add on to the morning comments? งั้นถ้าอย่างนั้นนะคะต้องขอบคุณ panelist ทั้ง3ท่านมากแล้วก็ขอบคุณ presenter ทุกท่านที่เดินทางมาไม่ว่าจากในประเทศหรือว่าต่างประเทศนะคะต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านที่ช่วยให้เกิดการอภิปรายแล้วก็หวังเป็นอย่างยิ่งว่าทุกท่านในนามของผู้จัดแล้วก็ทั้ง EF แล้วก็ของ CCE ด้วยนะคะต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านมากแล้วก็ขอเสียงที่สำคัญนะคะคงต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านที่ร่วมรับฟังแล้วก็ให้คำถามและคอมเมนต์เข้ามาไม่ว่าท่านจะอยู่ออนไลน์หรือว่าในห้องประชุมนี้ถ้าอย่างนั้นขอเสียงปรบมือดังๆให้กับตัวเองแล้วก็ให้กับพรีเซนเตอร์ทุกท่านค่ะ แล้วก็เช่นกันนะคะถ้าท่านมีคอมเมนต์หรือคำถามเนี่ยท่านยังสามารถส่งเข้ามาในสไลโดแล้วก็ใน Facebook Live ได้แล้วก็ถ้าเป็นไปได้เราจะพยายามหาคำตอบจากวิทยากรทุกท่านแล้วก็นำเสนอข้ออภิปรายต่อไปค่ะขอบคุณมากค่ะสำหรับวันนี้คงจะต้องปิดการไลฟ์แล้วขอบคุณค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ